Well, hello. Hello, Mike Manley.
Hello, my friend.
Well, that's hilarious. I thought you were going to pull up a tome that you've been reading. What
Let's see. What can I put? Oh, well, I don't know if I talked about this already.
what do you got?
This came out.
Oh, your Shazam omnibus.
Yes, the first.
Hold on, let me give you the screen. Push it up again. Oh, that's
I got this in the mail. I probably got it in the mail well over a week ago, but I finally opened the box up the other day, and DC finally reprinted first I think dozen issues of Power of Shazam, which is really nice. Nice. They did a great. DC always does a great job on their production, but I think they did an extra nice job on this one.
Yeah, that was the book that you worked on with Jerry Ordway, who was a guest of ours a couple of weeks ago.
Right, and was penciled by Pete Krause.
Mm-hmm. And who did the coloring on that? Do you remember?
Glenn Whitmore was the colorist.
Oh, cool! Yeah, Glenn's jumped around on the show a little bit. He's been in the chat room. That's very cool. Hold on a second. All right, we'll figure it out. So let's do our introductions. Welcome to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite pandemic podcast, run by creators, cartoonists, and men of letters. Jamar Nicholas, Philadelphia's favorite son, and also your internet safe space. Hello. I'm always joined to my virtual left.
He's not safe. He's very dangerous.
I'm a dangerous man. Yeah, that's me.
Don't let him fool you.
Joined as usual by modern master of comic books, Mike Manley. Say hey, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
And who's our studio cat with us tonight?
It was Cornwell. Cornwell, the studio cat.
Those cats just are right up under you the whole show. I love it. You can't.
Luckily, Cornwell's only like 10 pounds if he's lucky, but his brother's twice. He's like 20 pounds, so I'm glad he's not crawling all over me.
Well, he's 20 pounds. That's a big cat.
Yeah, he's a big cat. He's a big boy.
I want to say hello to everybody who is watching us live. If you're joining us for the first time, hello. From YouTube, hello from Facebook, and hello from from our audio people. If you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher or any of those other platforms.
Hello, Stitches.
Hello, Stitches. Pencil to Pencil is brought to you by the fine folks at Graphicsly who create Clip Studio Paint. You know about Clip Studio Paint. If you're a cartoonist, you probably use it or you haven't gotten around to it yet, but get on the bus.
I was just using it like 10 minutes ago.
We'll have to ask our guest if she uses it also. And also John Morrow, who is the publisher behind Two Morrows Publishing, who publishes our fine magazine Draw, along with other things you like Mike, like the Kirby Collector, also Lego Brick Journal, and other things. Did Mike freeze? You gotta love live television, don't you? All right, hopefully he'll come back. I'm gonna kick him. But yeah, it's great to see you guys back again. For people who are joining us for the first time, Pencil to Pencil is a live podcast that comes to you every Wednesday and Saturday evening. We have a thick, with 2 C's, catalog of guests in our archive. So if you enjoy what we're doing here, subscribe and sign up to see us on YouTube and follow us on our Facebook page, and you might find a new cartoonist you love. Mike Manley, I want to bring in our guests because we have a lot to cover tonight. This person and I go back a long ways, and I'm very, very, very proud of her success. She is an acclaimed cartoonist, publisher, and what did I call her? Vanguard of Kickstarter. I like that one. I think Spike has figured out the matrix code and is using it to its utmost potential. So I would love to get caught up with her and introduce her to what we've been doing, and maybe we'll get some questions answered. So let's bring her in. See Spike Trotman, or as we affectionately call her, Spike. Hello, Spike.
Hello. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Jamar. What's up?
What's good? What's good? Thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, happy to do so. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, yeah. This has been a weird pandemic labor of love for us. We've been going live every Wednesday and Saturday since April 1st.
Cool.
So I mean, that doesn't sound like a long time ago, but it's a long time ago.
Seems like an eternity.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, Kel's in the chat. Hi, Kel. What's up?
Oh, so your people are coming. That's what's up.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I forgot to say this. I will be joining the conversation and also producing the show. For people who are watching this, I can't tell that you're here. The only way I know you're here is if you type something in the comments. So say hello and tell us where you're watching from. And if you have a question for myself, Mike, or Spike, please put it in the comments as a form of one thing at a time. Don't ask me 9 questions at the same time. And we'll put them on the screen and get started. All right, so Spike, the first question, and then we'll just get the ball rolling, is how are you surviving in the pandemic?
I am in my element. I'm very comfortable in isolation, and not to turn this into like a weird therapy session or anything, but I think it has a lot to do with how I was raised, which is for people who know, there is a town called Potomac, Maryland. And Potomac, Maryland is a suburb for people who want to make big fat Washington, D.C. money, but they don't want to live in Washington, D.C. And so they are willing to spend a significant portion of their adult lives commuting 45 minutes each way into town to work and then out so they can sit on their acre and a half in their McMansion and not talk to their neighbors. And that is where I was raised. I was raised in I guess the best term is a new development, like a suburb that didn't exist 10 years ago, 10 years before we moved in. Yeah. And it was in the woods. And when I mean in the woods, I mean, you can hear bobcats at night in the woods. I mean, you look out your front door and there's a literal wild turkey just looking back at you on your stoop. Like you couldn't keep a vegetable garden because there were that many deer. My mother found a fox den and would go down there regularly to feed them eggs. The woods. Okay.
That's like woods.
Yeah.
That's
and
real woods.
That meant there wasn't a ton of things to do. I mean, once you explored the woods when you were in your like single digits and tweens, you were pretty much done. And I didn't have any friends' houses that I could bike to or walk to or anything like that. And I was also raised by people who weren't particularly engaged with their children. So they just sort of like shoved toys and books at you and then left. It's like, okay, there, don't bother me. And that's partially how I learned to draw, but also how I learned to be pretty cool with minimal human contact for extended periods. And that's kind of still where I am. I see people tweeting about, oh God, I'm gonna literally go fucking insane if I can't go to a restaurant tomorrow. Right. I haven't seen my friends in weeks. Oh my God, what's happening to me? I feel like my brain is melting and running out of my ears. I can't take it. And I'm all like, I mean, I have Discord, I'm fine. And it's actually been a great opportunity. Speaking, just for me here, it's been a great opportunity to get my life back on track in the sense that I am back in a reliable routine. I'm working out again. I'm back to learning Japanese like a good fucking nerd. Like all nerds. It's like one of those bits like, oh, well, every man tries to learn guitar at least once. Every nerd tries to learn Japanese at least once. And I am that nerd right now. So I'm doing that. And, I'm back to lifting weights and I'm getting up at a decent hour and going through my routine and answering all my emails and actually getting some art time in. And all of that is because I am not traveling. And even 2019 was supposed to be the year where I didn't travel. I still traveled, because you get the occasional email that's super hard to say no to. And, it's like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. And then it's like, you want to come to London? It's like,
not right now. No.
Obviously I want to come to London. And so there's just emails you don't say no to. And now I don't go anywhere. And I haven't gone I haven't left the condo I live in, in a significant way, like omitting dog walking and like, oh, we're out of eggs type stuff.
Yeah.
I haven't left my condo since late March, and I'm totally fine with it. I'm totally fine.
How are you getting your provisions? Are you kind of just like ordering everything in, or you have like Peapod or something like that?
My neighborhood is amazing. Basically, I live across the street from an amazing market.
Mhm.
And if you go down the street and you take a kitty corner turn, you're like half a mile from a Trader Joe's.
Mhm.
But if you don't feel like Trader Joe's, you can turn and you can go to the Jewel Osco. And if you don't feel like any of that, you walk in the opposite direction and there's an H Mart. So
we
it's
have
all
H
there.
Mart.
I love H Mart. Oh
H-
my God. I love H Mart. It's life changing. I was so happy when they moved in.
Oh, I love H Mart.
For folks that don't know, that's a Korean like grocery store chain. And it's the best. It's just the best. It's like it's even hard to go into how much I love it. It's amazing.
Does your H Mart have like a what is it, Mike? Kind of like a food center?
My H Mart has a food court.
Yeah, food court. Yeah, does yours?
Ours does too. You can get really, really cute baked goods. You can get buns, spam musubi, bowls of noodles. It's tteokbokki if you want. It's the H Mart here is so great, and I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
Making my mouth water. Like,
yeah,
oh, man,
I love Korean food. Like everybody, like I am. Oh, I hate this term, foodie. But like most people who are into food on the internet have heard of Mangchi, who is a Korean woman who's kind of like the godmother of American Korean cooking. And I got turned on in a big way to Korean food by her. So I make my own kimchi, I'm on that level. I make army-based stew. I love everything she does. She's amazing.
You know what? I think there's a little bit of a corollary to being an artist and also cooking.
Really?
I don't know a lot of artists who can't cook.
I don't know. There's some artists I would say that skew that pretty good. I mean, I'm a pretty good cook, and I've actually had a job where I did cook, but I would not say every artist is.
Should I walk that back? Is that
you might you might want to walk it back, but otherwise you might be walking into the emergency room with
some E. coli.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I know.
I think a lot of the younger artists I meet when I was in school did not cook. Their cooking extended to ramen.
Right.
So
you think it might be an age thing, like a?
Yeah, I met a lot of young people who didn't know how to cook a hamburger.
Wow.
They could make ramen, but they didn't know how to start a barbecue.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So,
yeah, I mean, part of the reason I know how to cook is, quite frankly, believe it or not, this will strike both of you as unbelievable. You're not going to believe it when you hear it.
I don't believe it already.
A lot of cartoonists don't make a lot of money. So a lot of my ability to cook, it was just like, okay, cool, beans. What are we gonna do about this? How are we gonna make beans interesting for the 5th night this week? Or I have rice. How many things can I do with rice? This rice is old and dry. I am not throwing the rice out, we'll just make rice pudding out of it. Oh, this rice is a day old. It's not completely desiccated. We can make fried rice out of it. And now I'm one of these people that go to restaurants and I have their dishes and I'm like, why'd I even come? I can make this so much better at home. Oh my God. Really? This is pad see to you? Really? That's cute. That's
turn it into our parents. Like, I'll make you a cheeseburger. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. We have food at home.
That's right. Yeah, and also with the everybody being home, it seems like really, I don't miss restaurants. I really don't.
I kind of do because it's like the kind of restaurants I miss are the restaurants that I cannot recreate at home. Like Korean barbecue has that. It has the hob in the middle where you sit around and it's a really communal kind of thing where everybody has their little slices of like bulgogi or whatever. And, you're doing the dip and the hot pot and the frying. And like, that's an experience that's just beyond, gosh, this food is good. Yeah. But like you can't really, I mean, I would not go to a hot pot restaurant right now. But at the same time, I'm terrified that all the really good restaurants in Chicago are going to be gone by the time this is over. Because it's like the magazines I follow, which are all online now because, magazines are dead. They have this weekly tally running of restaurants that are not coming back. And it's incredibly depressing reading because it's like, Bill's Hot Dogs has been a fixture of Logan Park for 35 years, but they have informed our staff so they will not survive the pandemic. And it's like, as a small business owner, I know what it's like to pour your life into a business. I know what it's like to work 7-day weeks because you have this passion for this thing you love, and it's your identity and your pride and a thing that you can tell people about and be like, yeah, I did this. Look what I did. Yeah. And now for a lot of people, it's gone. And it's gone in the most unfair, painful, sudden way imaginable.
Yeah. But you know what? I did see a commercial for Wiener Circle out here. I don't know how that happened. I think Wiener Circle is in fine shape. If I can be so.
Well, you'll have really nothing but chain restaurants in the end.
Oh God, don't say that.
Because my favorite restaurant I've been eating at for 30 years, they're still closed because, well, one, you can't. It's a smaller restaurant, so if you only have a quarter of your potential customers, that's not really enough to stay open.
No. Yeah, I live down the street from a place that's been around since I moved to Chicago, so like 20 years, and it's like a fixture in the community, and it's gone. It's like they didn't even put up a whole like thanks for the 30 years of business. It's just plywooded up. The door is not accessible. It's clear they're not coming back. And my husband will walk the dog sometimes, and he'll actually do a circuit of the neighborhood to make sure that the places we really like are still functioning. And he'll come back and be like, oh my God, the pizza place has been closed at noon 2 days in a row. I'm starting to get concerned and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's almost like a Deadpool, not the Marvel character. It's like, what's going to close next?
And it sucks. It sucks.
So I especially when all of this started, I saw kind of like the sigh of weird relief from a lot of cartoonists who were like, oh, I can finally stay home and get some stuff done. But that didn't last very long. Because I think
it's a double-edged sword. It's one of those deals where I remember being in my 20s and road tripping to every convention I could, and doing that whole thing where you're sleeping 6 to a room, and whose turn is it in the bed tonight, and who gets the floor or the chair or the bathtub, and you're just cutting corners and pinching pennies and grinching out hard because you want to cut a profit at these cons, and you sit there and you give 3 days of your life to make $200 because it's validating to make a profit at a convention, and you multiply that by 15 and that's your year. And to be perfectly frank, I'm up for that shit when I'm 20. I'm up for that shit when I'm 25. That's nice. I was doing all kinds of cons at that point in life, but I'm older now. And I kind of have this attitude now where, and this is going to sound incredibly pompous, but I want folks to sort of take a journey with me here, where there is a certain price my time is worth now. And when things do not meet that, it is not worth my time, and I do not expend my time on it. And this is something I think is very common for all careers that advance, where once upon a time, 3 days of labor plus travel was worth $200 profit to me because I made it worth it, because I pinched my pennies and I ate, I ate out of the 7-Eleven across the street from the hotel 3 days a week, and so on and so forth. Nowadays, like if Iron Circus is going to do a convention, we need to net, not gross, net like maybe $750, $1,000 a day for me to be happy, and if I go to a con and it lasts 3 days and we net less than $1,000, I think long and hard about whether we are going to come back to that con. And I know a lot of people are like, really? Like that seems pretty harsh. In a way, yes, but at the same time, Iron Circus is now an entity that I never want to. My whole philosophy when it comes to business is don't let any doors lock behind you. Never become over reliant on a single platform or outlet for anything you do.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we make money at comic book conventions. We do, but it is not our primary source of income. It's a great way to get out there, meet new cartoonists, because whenever Iron Circus shows up at a show, I definitely have someone go up to Artist Alley and grab anything they see that looks interesting. Like that's part of our scouting. It's really important because there's always some 22-year-old up in Artist Alley who can blow everyone out of the water. And I want to know who they are before Random House does. And that's important. And also, the whole public relations thing. We sponsored FlameCon, for example, recently, and that was cool. I love doing that. But conventions are not the kind of money makers that will make or break my year, and they haven't been that for a very long time. And while, again, good for public relations, good for moving books, good to just see the lay of the land and comics in general, they're not priority. And I will continue to do them. But at the same time, they're not as important as they once were, because at this point we now have a lot of online sales. All our stuff is populated to Amazon the minute it's released. It's on Bookshop. It's on the Iron Circus store. It's in Comixology. It's distributed internationally. There are a lot of avenues that we have. So
yeah. Well, one really interesting thing that you touched on at the very beginning of that is, which might be like a splash of cold water to a lot of young cartoonists or people who are kind of like still grinding on the con circuit, is when you actually have a plan.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, also, hi, Kino. What's up?
Right. And a lot of people just show up and they're like, yo, this is amazing. We're at the show. We didn't make any money, but.
Okay. Yeah. Every once in a while, you'll get one of those people who's all like, you should come do Itty Bitty Con. And I'm like, no, why not? Oh, I can tell just by looking at this site, it's all about movie stars. It's all about Star Trek memorabilia. I would not make money at Itty Bitty Con. Itty Bitty Con is not for me. And they'll say, oh, it'll be fun. Just come anyway. It's like, okay, let's talk about it'll be fun. Come anyway. It costs me now 4 figures to get a pallet of Iron Circus stuff wherever it needs to go. So just without hotel, without travel, 4 figures, bam. And then there's the table, and then there's whoever's going to be minding the table, and then there's going to be, the hotel and food and all that other stuff. So, best case scenario, Iron Circus is shelling out $3,000 to get where it needs to be.
Right.
And Itty Bitty Con is not going to be $3,000 worth of fun. I might make an exception for a kind of con where maybe it'd be bursting with talent I could scout or something like that. But at that point, no. Like, no. If I'm not going to recoup costs at the very least, like, I'm not going. I understand comics is fun for a lot of people who go to conventions, but for me, it's work, and work needs to pay its own way.
You know what? I want to let Mike jump in here, but me coming from self-publishing and kind of like digging my way through the trench, when I got to a certain point where I started bumping up against mainstream people and finding out I don't have the same attitude I used to back in the early thousands about this stuff, is a lot of the mainstream people who kind of looked at conventions from a whole different mindset. Because a lot of times, especially back then, either they were sent to a place or they just kind of walked the floor until their signing at 12 o'clock happened. Or I've seen a lot of mainstream guys just show up and crash a table and put pages down and just start selling.
Yeah.
And like a lot of mainstream guys don't look at cons as something that they have to budget.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just a money maker for them, or they're comped to get there. They don't have to pay for their exhibition space. So, Mike, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about, like, was that more your early relationship with comic book conventions, especially when you're at Marvel?
When I was probably even more than when I was at DC, because my career took a bump, obviously, when I did something like Batman.
Yeah.
How bad?
you know, I did conventions as a way to meet other professionals,
Mhm.
and you want to meet your fans, but you also want to, you got to fly your own flag.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because, you know, the company may fly your flag at that moment
Mhm.
because it's in their interest, because they're making money off of you to fly your flag.
Mhm.
But the minute it's not, they got somebody else's flag to fly, and then you know. So what I found is that most conventions were happy to comp you up until about 10 years ago.
Mm.
And then, depending upon where you are in the spectrum, they would or they would. That's when, like, you had to prove you were a professional,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when Reed Pop and guys like that came in, and it's like, I don't have to fucking prove shit to anybody.
Right.
I put bricks in this building, so you know, if I go to a convention, now I'm not saying they got to pay for my hotel room. Oh, that's all nice, right? And I've had those days. Pay for my, give me a booth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I got to prove to you that I'm a professional, fuck you. Basically. You know, I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't need to do your show, because then your show really is about everything else, but besides comics.
Yeah.
And that's why I stopped doing the wizard shows and things like that.
Yeah.
I would go to a wizard show, and there would be a lot of people there, the first few. Then each show was like less and less and less and less. And then it's like the guy who held the door for Rocky Balboa in Rocky 14 will be here. And the people are more interested in the guy that, you know, held the door for Rocky Balboa than me, because they're not booking people. They're not talking about comics. It's about entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would have little kids go by the table, and they look at you like, oh, what's that? What's you know, you're like the zoo animal nobody wants to visit.
Yeah.
And so, and then if you're small press, it's even worse.
Oh my God, yes. Yeah.
Because then they don't even have Iron Man on your table, right? You know what I mean? And then they look at that and they go like, I mean, we've joked about this before. You could be at a show, and I've seen this. You have an independent creator, and they're
the energy level.
They're just sitting there, people walking by, and it's almost like he would have been better to say, come to my table and look at my $10,000 shit sandwich. Then people would at least like, what? That's insane. But they would go over to look at the $10,000 shit sandwich just to tell you, you know, dude, I'm not paying $10,000 for this shit sandwich, right? At least that would get their interest more than you trying to give your independent. You will give them something, they will walk further away from your table. Like, oh, what? What? You give me a free comic book at a comic book convention? That there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. This is wow. This is really speaking to my experience. It's like, I think that comics is it has undergone a major like seismic change in the past like 10 years. And there is this sort of culture that's trying to sort of hold on to that wizard world mentality, where it's quite frankly, it is about maybe 3-4 publishing companies specifically, and the characters that are represented by those companies, and the experience of reading books starring exclusively those characters, exclusively from those companies, and also the collectible aspect of it. And that is what Wizard World really, really spoke to. Like, especially in Chicago, the Wizards World Chicago had by the way, hi Joe and hi Carla. They spoke to this sort of, like, the first thing you saw when you walked in it was like, I don't know if anyone's seen the movie, but it's like that scene from The Wrestler where all these washed up wrestlers are lined up right in front of the entrance. And it was kind of surreal for me because, you know, I watched wrestling as a small child, and all of a sudden, oh, I know you, you're Ted DiBiase's bodyguard.
Right.
And you're just walking by them. And then the guy who was the little kid in Terminator 2 is still, you know, milking that crusty, bloody teat for as much as he possibly can. Yeah. And they got primacy of place. They were like front and center when you walked in, with all the sort of pre-laid out cue velvet rope things just ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason, the last time I did Wizard World, is my table was free. And Wizard World was just like, you should come do Wizard World. And keep in mind, this was like a long time ago. I wouldn't be surprised if it was 10 years ago. And I was all like, you know what? This means it would cost me train fare to do Wizard World. And I am ready to spend $1.75 to see if Wizard World is worth doing. And I went, and no, it is literally not worth $1.75. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And you were absolutely right, Mike. As a person selling independent work, alternative comics, you were worse than ignored. You were ridiculed pretty much.
The thing is that crowd, it's not like they're hostile to you, but it's like a supermarket, and like that's the aisle I never go down because it's, no frills or whatever, or that's the health food aisle where everything's $20 more expensive. They don't have any context to understand you because that person is not a comic book fan.
No, they're not. That's an amazing way to put it. They are not comic book fans. They're there to get a copy of Wolverine signed by the person who penciled Wolverine because they are about that particular character by that particular publisher and wants to make sure that, they have every aspect of memorabilia to do with that one thing. And that is not about let's read stories, except there are pictures with the words. And
they're not even about Wolverine because I was there with guys that did stuff like Wolverine, but they're not even about Wolverine. They're about getting whatever they're buying the deal to get all the guys who were in the Avengers to sign some poster. Right.
To sign their Hawkeye quiver or something.
Right. That's what so that the last Wizard World I did was probably the saddest, most boring convention I had ever done because basically I just sat in a room that's no fun for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, however those things, and they keep going longer. Now it's like we open at 7:45 and then we close at like 9:45, and it's like
wildly inconsiderate.
So I think, but the other side is the indie shows like SBX or whatever, or the one in New York. Mocha, you can't get in those either because now those have become sort of the opposite in a way. It's like what's your indie cred, right? So I sort of feel like as a because I've done self-published and I've done mainstream. I've done all kinds of different things. So to me, you're just a cartoonist.
I agree.
Period. So I don't feel like, because there was a time, and we've talked about this before, where there was a really distinct, there was the Robert Crumb Underground, the Jaime Hernandez, the Los Brothers Hernandez level, graphic stuff, right? Then there was the Marvel, the mainstream stuff. And so there was a little bit of a, like, you knew what aisle you were in kind of a thing. And sometimes you would go to a convention and you would meet people from the other aisle. And sometimes they would be nice to you. And sometimes they would be like...
tribalism, yeah.
And it's funny because when one member of that tribe would go into the other thing, then people like fuck that dude. He's trying to kill our tribe.
Yeah, I got
he's on the other side. He's on the other side of the watering hole now.
Yeah, I got a huge sense of that when I was getting started in webcomics, it was like these days, one of the things that I really love about the internet is these days, if I'm 22 and I'm fresh out of RISD or MCAT or SCAT or something, or even out of high school and I've got the chops, basically a couple of years of hard work and I could be making halfway decent money on the internet with a little luck and a little dedication. I could have a Patreon, I could run a Kickstarter, I could have a check coming in.
A lot of dedication.
To be fair, probably a lot of dedication.
More dedication than anything else, because there's people who start, as you know, and then they... And being prolific and being dedicated is an important aspect of that. But that infrastructure did not exist when I was 22 or 23. And we were just sort of like wildly flailing, trying to figure out how to make money on the internet. And the thing that struck me
very solidly back in those days is the intensely weird hostility of specifically newspaper cartoonists who had this whole sort of like fantasy world built up that everyone on the internet who made comics was insanely jealous of newspaper comics. And the only reason they put their comics on the internet is they didn't have the chops to make it in the newspaper. And so we had all those people who put comics on the internet had conspired as part of a vengeful cabal to destroy newspapers because we couldn't get into them, and therefore if we couldn't get into them, they're not allowed to exist. And it was just like you'd be reading the shit that they'd be putting on message boards. You'd be like, oh my god, you believe this? You know, it's like,
well, I think it's generational too, because I think if you when I came in the business, the guys I admired, to them the peak was to be a newspaper cartoonist, because that was considered to be the peak of cartooning. If you were Hank Ketchum or Charles Schultz or Hal Foster, you became a multi-millionaire.
Yep.
Right? Yep. And you made a lot of money and everybody respected you. And comic books at that time was looked down on, right? It wasn't only with like the generation right before me, would be guys like Simonson and people like that comic books sort of became respectable, a little bit more respectable, right? But then you have guys of my generation, and I've talked to many of them, who are looking at web comics, and they're kind of like,
yeah.
But the audience of web comics, in fact, I just talked to a guy a couple of weeks ago. He was looking to pitch something to Webtoons. And this is something I found out from studying Webtoons. The Webtoons audience is not going to buy Iron Man, is not going to buy a pulp hero. They're interested in romance.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God, yes.
Relationships. If you have action, that is a backstory to the romance.
Yeah.
Right? Which is exactly the reverse of the mainstream, which is they want the action, and then the romance is the backstory of the action. So you also have to understand and that is developing, right? Because even 2 or 3 years ago, Webtoons was not the same.
No, not at all.
They were trying to recruit Americans and other people to put more mainstream people, but then they found out that stuff didn't really click with the 15-year-old girl that's reading Webtoons.
Yeah, and I think that's an important element to acknowledge, although I do think it's kind of funny that you use the term mainstream now, because it's like, as a person who is kind of on the publishing side, and every year, if you are a publisher and you have a good distributor, every year your distributor either invites you to a convention, or this year they had it virtually, where they sit you down and they basically give you the state of the market. And it's basically someone over there goes through all the numbers, all the sales that are recorded, including Amazon bookstore, that kind of thing, New York Times stuff. And they basically lay out for you the nature of the publishing industry. And the things I've learned there are comics is growing explosively, massively, out of control. The comics market is doubling in size every 4 to 6 years, which no other genre is doing that in publishing right now, which is why suddenly Random House cares and Macmillan cares and Harper Collins cares. Like, that didn't just come out. It's why Viz is suddenly like, oh, now we give a shit about English language originals. We want to publish English language originals. This isn't just like a random choice that these people have made. I don't want to be mean, but companies that size are extremely risk averse, bordering on cowardice. And they don't want to do anything that's not a sure thing, which is why they're all at the same time. It feels like they're all diving in because they're seeing the numbers and now they want a slice. And I'm fascinated to see where comics is going to be in 10 years. But anyway, the idea of what is mainstream, there are like multiple different, like what people would call mainstream. And if you want to talk about like volumes sold, Viz is mainstream. If you want to tap the bestsellers, Dogman is the most mainstream comic currently being published. The top 10 graphic novels, 6 of them are Dogman books. And Scholastic, which is the only publisher in the country that gets to march into schools and set up their booths and go buy it. and everyone's like, "Oh, that's so good for the children." You know, it's like, so that's
But
yeah.
Dogman isn't real. Wolverine is real.
Wolverine, yes, that is absolutely true. Wolverine is a real man, whereas Dogman is just a drawing.
Wolverine is hot. Wolverine is hot. Sorry, Dogman is not hot.
Yeah, exactly. Dogman doesn't have those perfectly differentiated muscle groups and the skin tight costume, so he doesn't count.
That's a very important point. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's worth noting that like the genres that Harper Alley and Random House are now into they're very specifically YA genres, and that's because that is where a ton of the growth is right now. I wish, honestly, there was more interest in adult graphic novels, because I like graphic novels for adults very much, and I wish there was more front-facing shelf space and more displays and more new this week features on adult graphic novels. But for now, it is what it is, and all the growth, all of it, like if you look at BookScan data, all of the growth is in graphic novels, and the periodicals, the floppies, the monthlies, whoever you want to call them, have just been kind of like holding steady. And that's just sort of like the nature of the market right now. So when people still talk about like mainstream comics and the big two, I'm kind of like, must be Poindexter, must correct. And that's kind of what.
Well, even to say that people who go to the shop every Wednesday still who don't know who Raina is, which kind of blows my mind. You know,
that's when I know their opinion literally doesn't count.
Right, but why would they? Because when you go in the comic book shop, you don't see it.
Yeah, you don't see it, and I think that's definitely worth acknowledging. But at the same time, people who, if you talk to them about Smile or Drama or Ghosts or Dogman or Amulet or all these other books that kind of are getting 5 million count first runs, which is the publishers are like, okay, this should hold us for now, 5 million copies. I do not take into consideration, I should say, the opinions of people who aren't aware that's happening, because they claim to be interested in comics. They are not. They are interested in a subsegment of comics which has taken priority over the reality of the entire picture of the industry. And if they want to sit in their treehouse and obsess over their specific slice, that is their right, and they are welcome to do that. If all they care about is, Wolverine 1983 through 1997, I am not going to tell those people to not have a good time and enjoy what they enjoy and love what they love and buy their slabbed comics, which is this whole other fucking conversation. But at the same time, I think there is a issue with people deciding only what they care about is representative of the full picture. And therefore, they feel empowered to get up on a podium and talk about how this is what's killing comics right here. This thing that is happening over here, it's all their fault. And this is why DC just had those layoffs. And this is why this series got canceled. And it's all because of that. And comics is dying. And comics is this. And it's like, the minute comics is dying comes out of your mouth, I know you don't know shit. And that's just all there is to it.
I love it.
Well, that type of comic has been dying since the 90s.
Yeah, dying.
that part of the business has been in decline since the 90s, because you did not have the typical next wave of kids to come in and read comics like their older brother or their cousin or whatever did, right?
Yeah.
So like when I would go to a convention, there were always kids who would come up with comics. Now I go to the convention and it's guys with gray hair on their chin coming up with comics, and no kids coming up with comics, right?
They're too busy in the back reading Bone and Smile.
Well, the kids, because I teach a high school class, so the kids that I've been teaching that class for 10 years. So I've seen many separate waves of kids coming in and reading. And the kids that are coming in now, they know all the webcomic because I see and I ask them what they read. But they don't know who even Kelvin and Hobbes are now, because that level of parent and kid have transitioned through. right?
Yeah.
And nobody goes to Borders anymore or Barnes and Nobles because they're closed. And so you don't have that little island we'd always have when your mom's over there looking at something or your dad's looking at something, and you're not looking at the manga. You might go, oh, here's a funny drawing, here's a cartoon book. The accident, right, where you would find stuff. So
that's how I got into Evan Dorkin. I had a friend who was this will date me super, super bad, but I had a friend who was one of those super fans for The Endless, Neil Gaiman's Endless. And so much so she had a pull box at the local shop, and we were going to go see a movie, and she's like, oh shit, never mind. You know, my comic should be there. Let's drop by the comic shop first and I'll go get my pull box with the newest Sandman comic. And we went in there, and while I was waiting for her to, you know, she was in line and doing whatever. While I was waiting for her, I saw a book on the shelf called Fun with Milk and Cheese. And I was all like, oh, I get it. They're milk and cheese, but they went bad. So they're bad. Haha. And I picked it up and went through it. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, and it was so like incredibly funny and self-aware and like perfect for a teenager, where it was about kicking the ass of people you don't like. And I'm like, and like to this day, it's weird because now Evan Dorkin is this guy on Twitter who fucking talks to me. You know, like 16-year-old me would be like, what the fuck? Really? It's very weird.
And the internet wins again, right? Even the closeness and the relationships that we're able to have wouldn't have been so easy if not for the internet.
Internet has been honestly, there are people every once in a while who are like, Twitter is stupid and pointless, and all that tells me is you don't know how to use Twitter.
Yeah, I see those people all the time. I don't believe that, but it's kind of like,
there are so many people I've published that I found on Twitter. I currently have, let's see, is it around here somewhere? Did I take it out of the room? No, I took it out of the room. Okay, great. There's a book I'm publishing right now called Banned Book Club, which it's kind of, well, I thought it was going to be our runaway bestseller for the year, but another book is coming up close behind. It's a memoir of a woman who grew up in authoritarian South Korea, and she was an actual member of an actual banned book club, and she had friends disappeared by the secret police and everything. Like it was for real. It was hardcore. And that happened on Twitter. I have a friend who is married to this lady, and he was like, you are not going to believe the story my wife told me. It's so wild. And she didn't tell me this before we got married or anything, because apparently everyone in South Korea has a story like this. It's not unusual. And she just was like, did I ever tell you about the time I was in a banned book club in college, and a couple of my friends got beaten by the police and went to jail, and they tear gassed us in the lunch hall for watching videotapes of foreign news broadcasts, because the news broadcasts in Korea were censored by our military government. And he was like, no, dear, this is something you had not shared with me. And he was just recounting all this on Twitter, and I tweeted at him like, that needs to be a comic. And next thing you know, we spent like a year and a half making it, and I printed the largest run of any Iron Circus book I've ever printed, and half of them were spoken for before they even hit the warehouse. And now we're looking into the reprint for 2021, because I just do not believe in my heart this run's going to last till the end of the year. It's been like, that's what I mean. And Twitter is also full of hashtags, and I find a lot of artists because of the hashtags. So sometimes there'll be things like visible women, visible NBs, portfolio day is a really big one. Drawing while black is another real big one. And I love going through those tags and basically just bookmarking people. And like, it's especially good now since I can't go to conventions. So used properly, and not just to get into fights with idiots, Twitter is incredibly useful.
Right, because you don't.
I think that's what most people would do. Is most people it's fights with idiots.
Oh yeah, and troll accounts and Russian operatives. Yeah.
Hey Spike, before we run out of time, we still have time on the clock. We're good. You're good.
Okay.
I want to make sure we kind of cover your timeline here.
Okay.
So,
God.
So we kind of got to where you grew up, but how did you start doing webcomics? Like what was the kernel that got you going?
I just love. I was like tuned into the internet. But all right, this is a joke my husband and I have. Please, no one take offense. But we have this running joke where the T-shirt we would never dare make and sell which basically says, remember when the internet was for smart people? And then in small print underneath, oh, wait, of course you don't. But we joke about making that t-shirt all the time. We were like internet early adopter types, and we saw that there are webcomics kind of already running. Like a good example is Rich Stevens' Diesel Sweeties, and he seemed to be doing like just fine all by himself with no like big corporation supporting him. I had never in my life been particularly interested in being in the newspaper. I say this despite the fact I feel I grew up during the last golden age of newspaper comics when Calvin and Hobbes was running and Far Side was in there, and Bloom County was there. I think that was like the last golden age of the newspaper comic. And I liked what I was reading, but it wasn't my vibe. And at the time I was reading comics too. I was reading Excalibur, and specifically for the Alan Davis Nightcrawler. But again, that's another story. I think a lot of pubescent girls and teen girls were reading for the Alan Davis Nightcrawler. But I stopped reading when they pulled that whole bullshit move where you couldn't follow the story unless you're buying 4 different titles.
Oh, the crossover stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I am a child. I have an allowance. I'm not going to buy 5 different $4 comics every month just so I can parse what's being said. Yeah. And so I just dropped out of comics for years, like 2 years. And I was brought back by Evan Dorkin. So if you're mad I'm here, blame Evan Dorkin. And I wanted to do that, but the thing you always heard, like always was like, you don't make money in alternative comics. Alternative comics is a hobby. Maybe it's a hobby where you make a few bucks, but it's not a support your family hobby. It's not a pay the rent, buy the groceries hobby. So you have to do it for the love. And I, in my extreme hubris, decided I was going to be the exception to the rule because I was just going to work extra hard. I was, I was raised by Black Republicans. It was all about work extra hard and be extraordinary, and that's how you'll make it in life. And so I was kind of investigating my options throughout my early and mid 20s, and I did a lot of things that did not fucking work at all. I did subscription sites before subscription sites were a thing, back when people were like, no one's going to pay money to read things on the internet. That's absurd.
Remember that time?
Yeah, that was a real time. And I was on like all these, God, oh my God, I'm trying super hard to remember. But the specific sites I were on, I was on something called Graphic Smash, and I was something called Girl-O-Matic, and I think it was and I think the largest check I ever got from Girl-O-Matic was for $7. Like that's how much that didn't work. Yeah. And that was around the time I was just sort of like I was trying anything. And the experience with Graphic Smash and Girl-O-Matic was, okay, I'm going to have to do this myself. I'm going to have to figure something out by myself, because clinging to any sort of structure is clearly not working. And I knew somewhere and sort of hazily in the back of my mind the key to making this happen. Because again, while I did read Excalibur as a teen, like I didn't have an interest in making stories like that either. It's like the kind of stories I wanted to make were the very alternative comic kind of stories. And I decided that the trick to this was developing an audience, people who were into what I was doing, people who would come and look for me at conventions because they liked what I was doing and they were into anything I was putting out. And that's kind of what I spent 5, 6, 7, 8 years doing with my webcomic, Templar Arizona, which I never finished. Sorry, everyone. But maybe I will one day. I mean, I haven't completely forgotten it, but it was this alternate history comic, strongly influenced by like early Love and Rockets, where it was more surreal and weird. Like it has surreal, weird aspects throughout, but it was definitely more aggressively, let's get in the spaceship early on. So that's kind of where I was coming from. And I did that for years and years and years. And the whole time I was doing it, I was noodling with ways to make money. And the most successful one, other than going to conventions, was I would have a little inkwell at the side of my site, and it had a thermometer kind of graphic on it. And it was like, for $200, Templar currently updates 3 times a week. For every $200 that shows up in this tip jar, I will update a 4th time.
I remember that, Spike. Wow.
And it worked. It worked really well. It worked
Right.
like the day it went up, I had like 2 months of 4-week updates, so didn't think it through. But but it worked. It was great. It was very validating. And then when the time came to print the book, and this actually feeds into why I was so into Kickstarter when Kickstarter first happened.
Yeah.
The time came to start printing books, I just put another thermometer graphic on the site that was all like, I've gotten quotes and this book is going to cost, I think it was $6,000 to print.
Mhm.
And so if you would like to buy a copy now, just go ahead and send the cover price to my PayPal. And when I get enough money, I'll print the book. And if I don't ever get enough money, let's not think about that. And so every day I'd go check my PayPal and I'd update the thermometer graphic. And over the course of like 3 weeks, I made $6,000. And I thought I was hot shit. Oh my God. You know, and that's crowdfunding. We didn't have that word back then. We wouldn't have that word for years, but that was basically crowdfunding. And it's what everyone in webcomics was kind of doing. They were already crowdfunding. So when Kickstarter came along in 2009, it felt very natural. It was just what we were doing anyway, except transparent and automatic. And that way it was like super trustworthy. There was an impartial third party showing you exactly what was in my PayPal. I wasn't fudging the numbers, and not that I was ever accused of that, but you know, it's just, and so I launched my first Kickstarter the year Kickstarter launched, which was 2009. And it funded, and it funded to, I think, I want to say like $13,000, which, believe it or not, that used to be a lot on Kickstarter.
Right.
There are people who were like offended that I Kickstarted something and made $13,000. And I always have to like go back and talk about this because it's so funny to me that somebody was all like, any comic that can make $13,000 on Kickstarter has no business using Kickstarter. You have no business using Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is for people who could never hope to make $13,000 on the internet just by asking. It's not for you. And my second favorite, which will always be, if you want to print a comic, be an adult, put on a suit, and go down to the bank and get a loan. Because that's what adults do. Adults don't beg for money on the internet. And I was like, okay, hater. And I was just like, and I just kind of kept doing my own thing. Because at this point, my parents didn't want me to become a cartoonist. A bunch of dudes in the newspaper didn't want me to become a cartoonist. A bunch of other webcomic people didn't want me to become a cartoonist. It's like, you think I've never, okay, cool. Well, update. Don't give a shit what you think. Gonna keep doing this, you know? And that's kind of where it's been at this point. I think I've launched, I want to say 25 or 26, maybe 24 projects. We're coming up on $2 million funded, which is really exciting. And I recently launched Iron Circus's first animation project, which has transformed it from a publisher into a honest to God multimedia company. And not in the sense of I'm 14, or I'm sorry, I'm like 22 and I've registered an LLC and we have aspirations to have a video game and a cartoon, a Saturday morning cartoon, and a comic, and of the IP of the property we made up yesterday. We haven't done anything, but we're still going to call ourselves a multimedia property on the signage we make for our Artist Alley table at Bitty Bitty Con. It's like, no, we're real. We're an actual multimedia company. We're making a cartoon right now. That's
amazing.
It's been really weird. Is
that like, Tracy's? Is that Tracy's Butler's?
Tracy Butler's Lackadaisy, which is about really cute cats who murder one another over alcohol. And if you haven't read it, it's wonderful. It's beautifully drawn, and it has cats getting like massacred against a wall by Tommy guns. So I don't know what else you could possibly want from a comic. I highly suggest reading it.
That scratches all my issues.
I interviewed Tracy in one of my issues of Draw about 10 years ago. I met her at a con in Philly and saw that.
Yeah, Tracy is one of those sort of classic internet cartoonists to me, who have this like wild-eyed, super loyal fan base that she has quietly built up over like 10-ish years or something like that. And they have been instrumental in making all of this happen. It's the biggest funded Kickstarter I've ever run. It's like at 330, I think. And we've been trying to, like, The thing that I always try and keep in mind is like when people dump that amount of money into a project, you owe to them as much transparency as possible. So we've been like updating it almost weekly.
Yeah.
We have a production blog. Everybody knows exactly where we are on the project at all times. You know, we're fulfilling all the stretch goals piece by piece by piece by piece, because you don't even want there to be like a moment's hesitation in anyone's mind. Like, is this actually going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if they check in on the Kickstarter, it's like, boom, like 50 updates that they didn't see that are all like, here's the animatic, here's the lighting test, here's this, here's that. And it's been going amazingly. All of that is because of Fable Siegel, who's the actual director, who is sitting in their house 24/7, 365, making sure all this happens. And it's being in animation, this is all very niche and shit, but it's really important to kind of what we're doing. Being in animation is very weird and interesting right now, because for the very first time, a fully sort of internet passion project has been picked up for a TV series by a production company, like a real production company. It's called Has Been Hotel, and it got picked up by, I think, A24 is the name of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time this has happened. And you kind of watch animation internet, animation Twitter, animation YouTube, all the little animation scenes kind of collectively going insane. At the prospect, this was now in play. This was now a thing that could happen.
Right.
And we are really happy to be doing this right now at this point in time. And that's kind of all
you're in a great space. But
yeah.
Spike, I had like 4 different things I wanted to touch on your
yeah, sure.
which I think is super interesting. I'll start at the beginning, that you were basically crowdfunding before that was a thing.
Yep.
And I also remember a bunch of other, I remember if I can call it a scene or community, is probably a better word for it. When the webcomics guys, I remember the newspaper wars with the NCS, and I remember all that stuff. I also remember that you guys were trying to monetize this when no one believed you could, or that was even, it was almost like you're breaking the contract by trying to get paid.
Yeah.
Right. So can you maybe touch on for a second about that I don't know, the static around trying to actually monetize your work at that time? Because it wasn't easy, right?
No, it wasn't easy at all. It was because, like, in a lot of ways, we got there before the infrastructure did.
Yeah.
And there was no roadmap. There was no, this is what happens now.
Right.
And there were a whole lot of people who, to me, like, they were intensely lacking in foresight, was like what I always figured. Like, how could you say this is never going to happen? How could you say this is never going to work? If the internet continues on like it does, it will inevitably work one day. I do not have a crystal ball. I can't give you a date. But the things like Kickstarter working out seemed obvious to me. Micropayments working out seemed obvious to me. And I thought I basically dismissed a lot of the criticism of what I and other web cartoonists were trying as, you are just not ready for something new you don't understand. I was of the opinion a lot of newspaper cartoonists were very comfortable growing on sort of as vines on the trellis of this thing. And they kind of saw that newspapers weren't doing so hot. And there was nothing really sort of that was going to predict a pull out of the nosedive of the published newspaper. And this was their bread and butter. These were their audiences. And like you said, Mike, this is what was making a lot of them millionaires. And the newspaper page, the comics page was in such a place where there were people who were just, inheriting dad's strip. And yeah, it's like, I remember I said something on Twitter to the effect, which, wasn't particularly constructive, but it's how I feel, where it's like Blondie recently celebrated its 80th anniversary. And I said something to the effect of like, no fucking comic should be celebrating its 80th anniversary. Can you imagine if you were a television producer or a person who aspired to have a TV show and you went in to that boardroom and you pulled out your pitch board and you pitched You pitched Mad Men, or you pitched Lost, or you pitched Pose, or you pitched, any one of these other shows. And after you were done with your pitch, the executives sort of like looked at you, did this whole like Shinji's dad thing at you. And they went, Okay, well, that sounds interesting. But we've been playing Howdy Doody for 70 years. And people, they really like Howdy Doody. So we're gonna stick with Howdy Doody. That sounds fucking absurd, but that is the comics page. Like the newspaper comics page is 70, 60, 50-year-old strips with the occasional strip that is slightly younger than myself. And the ability to become part of that is so stunted, and so like the chances are like this, and it's not something I ever aspired to. But the idea, to me, I know there are people who absolutely, they dreamed of being on the comics page one day, but that was never me, and that was never a lot of people I knew. And the idea that this was something that merited sustaining and merited protection to me was ridiculous.
So I'm trying to understand what the exactly, to clarify your point. So the cartoonists were coming against you because they felt that you were taking their
they lived in
stealing their because I do 2 legacy strips, right? I do the Phantom, which has been around 80 years.
Yeah.
And I do Judge Parker, right? And so I'm the fourth or fifth guy on Judge Parker.
Yeah.
And so, and they're selling stuff to the newspapers, and the people who read the newspapers want these strips. And if you try to cancel a strip, people write in and
emails.
They go, oh yeah, hey, wait a minute. Part of what I'm paying for in my newspapers, the features, which is the comic strip, right?
Yes.
Now, it is hard to launch a new comic strip because the newspapers themselves don't want comic strips.
No, they don't at all.
They only
run them begrudgingly.
They just want tire ads. They only want tire ads. They just want advertising. But people want the strips. And when I first started, been doing on my 11th year of Judge Parker, there were every year for the first 5 years or so, they did try to start new strips. But the problem is the newspapers didn't want to take the new strips. And if you put a new strip in, that means that you're cutting somebody else's strip, which already has, the people are going like, that's my favorite strip. So don't take Dondi out. Or
don't take Pluggers out. Don't take
right.
Don't take Love Is out.
But I don't think that the web comic and the newspaper comic audience is the same.
No, it's not.
There's a very small crossover of people I know who read my Marvel comic or DC comic stuff, bought my independent comic stuff I published, and read Judge Parker. But those are Mike Manley fans, right? Those are people that are Mike Manley fans. But there are people that are only fans of each one of those things. Yeah. And the success of one is not robbing the other.
No, but I mean, I agree with you there. But there were definitely people who are of the opinion that webcomic, like the ones that stand out to me is whoever was doing High and Lowest back in the day. I still have saved to my computer like a strip the High and Lowest creator made that was just fucking bagging on web cartoonists. And I remember reading it and being all like, do you think the people who read High and Lowest know what a web cartoonist is? Like, this really isn't for your audience. This is just you doing this to people like me. That's all this is. And then Wiley, the guy who did Non Sequitur, did one. And I was like, are you for real? You took time out of your day to shit on a bunch of people on the internet who just want to draw funny, haha jokes?
Yeah.
And like, oh my, I remember when that was going down. I forget the site it was on, but it was one of those sites where every time there was a news story posted, there was a comment section underneath it. And it straight up got so bad. I mean, demanding to see one another's tax returns bad, that the person who was running the site eventually just disabled the ability to comment on news stories about webcomics and newspaper comics specifically, because that, like, people will be dedicating their days to just doing this to each other in the comments. And like the thing that really struck me is like they straight up honestly believe that like we had that board, like the whiteboard that cops have that have the pins and the strings, you know, all their names circled and photographs of them that we were going to red X out every time a strip got canceled.
There was a lot of fear. Yeah, I do remember that.
It was bizarre. It was insane. And it makes me think of that bit in Mad Men where Don Draper's in the elevator and he just goes, I don't think about you at all. You know, it's like you're like my choices have nothing to do with newspapers. And I mean, part of the reason I don't have a lot of interest in ever trying to be a part of that world is the fact there are 80-year-old strips and there are people who collectively lose their shit if you try and cancel one of those 80-year-old strips. And I mean, to be perfectly frank, I understand my chances in a lot of ways of the kind of things I would be interested in.
Yeah.
And the kind of things I would want to write about aren't necessarily for the I still get the Tribune on my doorstep every evening crowd.
Now, just to kind of bat the ball back across the net, I totally understand I remember that whole thing, and I remember the fear was basically a fear of change.
Oh, right? Absolutely.
The webcomic, because I did webcomics for a bit too. Like people saw this new thing they couldn't understand or couldn't wrap their brains around, and they felt like they were coming for their guns, basically.
Yeah.
You know, these people are coming and they're going to like throw me out of my house. But now that we've kind of gotten past that.
Yeah.
I think
the initial terror. Yeah.
I really think the big picture here is that you guys were thinking like futurists.
Yeah.
This thing, the internet is real and this is the future and we're going to figure out how to put our stamp on it.
And we were young and we were willing to experiment. And, you know, in your early 20s and your mid 20s, you are more at that phase where you are you're not really thinking about when you're 60. You're not really thinking about, okay, but what if I get rheumatoid arthritis and I can't hold a pencil anymore? You're willing to, again, sleep in the bathtub. You're willing to travel 20 times a year. You're willing to throw yourself into endeavors that there is no guaranteed payout for. And that was kind of like the people who ground floored webcomics were those people. And I came in on the end of the ground flooring, and it kind of decided a lot of the kind of person I became, which is like very, well, fuck it, I'll do it myself, was kind of my approach to everything.
Yeah.
Where I wasn't really married to the idea of looking for a publisher. I wasn't really married to the idea of finding a trellis to cling to like a vine. So it's just like, well, fuck it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm just going to do it.
There's like a thing of, I guess you would call that maybe 7-8 years ago, was fiercely independent, right? Kind of like own your masters, Chance the Rapper. We don't need these people.
Yeah.
Right. And I always understand that there's a fear from the generation before you that doesn't understand or can't understand that you guys have the balls to just do what you need to do without somebody else's permission.
After the initial sort of hullabaloo kind of died down and like webcomic people versus newspaper comic people almost seemed kind of fucking quaint. Like after that was gone, I would sometimes see like old school newspaper cartoonist types on Twitter, and they just be all like, wait, so you put the webcomic on the internet and you publish it for free, and webcomic people be like, yes. And it's like, and then you make a book? Yes.
It's a totally different world.
And people buy it, even though they've already read all of it for free? It's like, yeah. Why? I don't know, but like they do. They just do, you know? Because like that was the part that always struck me as like that was the sticking point. Like they couldn't understand how here's the website, comic in full, read to your heart's content, and then these people would go and buy your book by the thousands. And it's like they're a fan. They don't want it on the internet. They want it on their bookshelf, because I think we're all over that whole the internet is forever thing. The internet is incredibly ephemeral and not necessarily forever. And if all it takes is a cartoonist who has done a comic, to come back to that comic 5 years later and decide the art is intolerable and they're embarrassed by the writing and press one button and it's gone forever. And like we've gone through that growing pain. There are cartoons, there are comics that have disappeared from the internet because the artist looked and went, ew, and just went, and it's gone. And fans can't find it. A great example, I don't know if I should be bringing this up, but there was a cartoonist who did basically stick figure comics, and they were extremely popular.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, and I was friends with this cartoonist for a while, and they were a very nice person, but they did really, really interesting, poignant comics, and those comics are now gone 100%, totally. And the only way to have them is like be one of the couple thousand people that ended up getting books from their Kickstarter. And if that's not you, SOL, sorry, you know, it's like the Wayback Machine is wiped. You can't even find it shared as a torrent anywhere. It's just gone. And that's why people buy books.
Just, you know, and just to maybe end this and go to the next part of our conversation, like the newspaper guys, and this is even a thing Mike can attest to, they don't really do kind of like collections unless it's like Zits or Baby Blues or, you know, Garfield's 60th or something like that. Like a, you know, the humor section bookstore collection of a strip doesn't really happen like it used to, but that was a model back then. So
I think with King I could not, well, they do reprint the Phantom because the Phantom's printed overseas. And they do keep that character because they make a fair amount of licensing money off of him. But I know other people I know that do strips. You could do like Mary Worth or something. You could make a strip, a reprint of it, but then I think they would also want to have their, and rightfully so because they own it, but or co-own it. And all these deals are different too with the syndicates because syndicates bought other syndicates. So North American Syndicate, which is what owned Judge Parker, was absorbed by Hearst. And Hearst owns King Features. But the Phantom is King Features. So you get different deals. Each person got a different deal. Each writer and artist gets a different deal. So it's not all the same, and it's different, I think, in the case of me coming on and doing it as basically a hired gun as opposed to being the guy who came up with the strip. Then you get
that guy's son or grandson.
Right. So, you know, I think the newspaper strips are in a tough spot because
newspapers are in a tough spot.
Right. But they're, you know, whenever I go out, people over, let's say, over the age of 60 or 70, all know the newspaper strips. And if I tell them Judge Parker or the Phantom, you know, they know Superman or Spider-Man or something like that. But they will know that. If you tell them a lot of other characters, they would have no idea. Conversely, the young students that I teach don't know any of the old characters. They know the stuff that's on Webtoons today. 5 years from now, most of that stuff will not be on Webtoons. It'll be whatever the next round of cartoonists come in. So, and I know guys that are in my era of comics who are now looking at Webtoons or now looking at the internet.
Now they are,
Right. Trying to move with the times a little bit, sure.
Right. And you always have people that are early adopters. You have people that kind of like wait and see how things are going. Because it was the same way with computers. I bought a computer in 94, and I knew a lot of other guys in comics who did not buy a computer for a long time because they didn't feel that all of a sudden everybody's going, you better get a computer, dude, because I'm sending you the script. And I'm not faxing it. What?
Are you fully digital or are you still ink and paper?
I do Judge Parker fully digital. And I do the Phantom traditional because I can sell the originals. But I can do whatever I need to do. Personally, I prefer traditional because I like having the original.
Mhm.
And as good as the digital stuff is, it's always a computer. I'm never going to lose a sheet of paper. But
yeah, that's an important element. That's why everything I do is okay. This is going to sound really bad, and I do apologize for it. Folks in the chat who care, I am not entirely sure where the unpublished chapter of Templar Arizona is. I don't know where it is. I mean, if I spent a day looking for it, maybe I could find it, but I don't know where it is. It's fully digital, and maybe it's on a hard drive I have in a closet. Maybe it's on the rescued files that I pulled out of an old hard drive before I changed machines. Like, it could be in a bunch of places. I'm not sure where any of those places are. And so when people are like, yeah, you can't lose a piece of paper with ink on it as easily as you can lose a file. And that's why I'm always traditional. It's like, I get it.
Well, I know guys who've lost years worth of work that's digital.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They've long since sold the originals or, whatever. And even the syndicates now,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of their old stuff that they don't have good copies of because they made really crappy copies in the old days. So
yeah, and I mean, I try and sort of plan for disaster in a lot of the things I do, which is why all the print files for all the Iron Circus books, they exist in 3 separate places right now. Like, they're on a Google Drive, they're on sort of dedicated cloud storage, and some of them are on my husband's machine and some of them are on my machine, and they go back and forth. So basically my whole thing has always been, I want to be able, if this apartment blows up tomorrow, I don't want to be out of business.
Yeah.
That's the way I put things. So.
You don't have like a Drobo or something in your studio with like 9 hard drives in it or something.
Well, the other thing is, it doesn't do you any good if it's on site with the other shit that gets burnt up at the same time. So you really have to have something that's off site, something that's on site, and the big media companies have more than one off site source.
Yeah, because it's like, I don't want, it's like, it would have to be an extraordinary, ridiculous string of events for me to lose absolutely every copy of every book we have in print. Like, my computer would have to blow up. My husband's computer would have to blow up. Google would have to suffer an unprecedented malware attack. And also the cloud storage people would have to, all of those things all at the same time. The likelihood of that is infinitesimally small. It's a risk I'm willing to take to just have it in 4 places,
All right, Spike, let's get to some questions. All right, so the chat room has been waiting patiently, and I'm going to start. I'm going guns hot. The first one is from our good person and buddy, Mama Carla Wiley.
Hi, Mama Carla.
Mama Carla asked Spike, what is it like to be a woman in comics?
Right now, pretty good.
Wait, let me finish the question. Is it harder or is it equaling out?
Honestly, right now, a lot of the most prominent creators in comics are women. Raina Tegelmeier comes to mind, who is a massive, massive multi-million bestseller, is making a huge imprint on a lot of sort of like the tweens and the kids who are wandering into the Scholastic Book Fair and picking up Smile or Ghosts or, drama. And that is filling a very interesting crack that was in comics for decades, which was something Mike talked about, which was like Marvel, DC, all the other sort of monthly periodical publishers not really giving a crap about children and just sort of playing to the same crowd of middle-aged men for 30 years. And so there was no in to comics for a long time, and it just sort of sold to the same crowd. Whereas now, I wouldn't say most, maybe a good percentage, I would say easily half the ins to comics, the roadway to get into comics and have the possibility of staying super into comics into your adult life is they're being sort of cleared by women authors and women writers. And it's not difficult at all to go into a YA bookstore section and see a whole bunch of comics by women. Yeah. And to be frank, reading has been sort of mildly feminized as a pastime for the past decade or so, where I'm not saying that, you know, boys are made fun of if they've read, but it is one of the hobbies that girls are kind of really encouraged to pursue. And as a result, the people every couple of years, you know, a whole new kind of group of folks who aspire to make comics get sort of vomited forth into the industry. And that has been majority girl and women for a few years now. And these are all people who came up on Smile and came up on Amulet and Bone and those kinds of books, and manga, tons of manga. I got a lot to say about Tokyo Pop, but it's not super relevant right now. There are a lot of manga out there that are directly aimed at girls and teen girls to read. And so if you walk into a comic shop that's on its toes, or a Barnes and Noble or something like that, you're going to find, and you're like a tween girl, and you're going to find a ton of things to read. You're going to find Fruits Basket. You're going to find Sailor Moon. You're going to find all kinds of things that are specifically for you. And that is playing out right now, and who is coming into comics, and who isn't just being the talent, they're being the administration. One of the things that I find kind of funny on a lot of social media is you'll run into a lot of dudes who have nothing but shitty things to say about women in comics. And I just want to be like, you're aware, like 60-70% of editorial is women, right? The people who hire you. But no, go off. Yeah. It's kind of cute almost. But yeah, it's turning. If there isn't parity now, I'll be shocked. I'll say that. If there isn't gender parity in comics right now, both in administration and on the creative side, I would be very surprised.
I have a lateral question for you, Spike. How is that received when people find out that you're a female publisher or you're a female CEO?
A lot of people know. Early on they didn't, but usually it's not even a thing people talk about. It's not even a thing that's like a matter to care about. Sure. I'm just here and doing my thing. I think there are people who, and this is something I say a lot, but I say it a lot because it's been my experience. There are men in the world. I'm not going to speak in broad stereotypes. I'm going to speak in lived experience. There are men in the world who are much more accustomed to seeing themselves centered in storytelling, and they lead unexamined lives. And they decide that because in the media they consume, they are the protagonist, that the world is set up for them in a similar way, that they are destined for levels of acknowledgement and success simply because of what they are. And people like me are strictly supporting cast, in the sense that I am allowed to be good at what I do, but I am not allowed to be better than them at what I do. And that is not something they consciously acknowledge. Like, this is going back to the whole unexamined life like thing. Yeah. But they expect, regardless of their own ability level, which can range from, you know, great to incompetent, like it runs the entire gamut. Regardless of their ability level, they expect to be rewarded. And by rewarded in this context, I mean, they're going to get their own book at Marvel, or if they have like a super boner to write for a specific Marvel character, of course they will be permitted to write for that specific Marvel character. Or if they want to make a graphic novel and publish it, it'll be received warmly and fantastically. Or if they want to be a publisher, their publisher will thrive, because they have been fed since childhood stories of deserved success lived out by people who are just like them. And then they actually get into the space of comics. And like I said before, there's a lot of women, and quite frankly, a lot of the media they consume, there is a character who's female, whose personality trait is the girl. So there's like one woman, you know, and like, that's okay. They're okay with the one in the corner. Again, not as long as she's not as good as they are. If the awards are handed out, she gets to take third place, but never hire. And when they see people like me, not just me, but people who are like me succeeding, and they do not succeed, they need to figure out why that is in a way that makes it not their fault. So it can't be that I am good at what I do. It has to be that Iron Circus is fueled exclusively by white guilt dollars. It can't be that we are selling 10,000 copies of a book because it's a good book. It's because feminists hate me personally, and they are buying this book to hurt me personally, this guy they've never heard of. And that's kind of a thing that I have experienced in Iron Circus experiences, that none of the things that we do or accomplish count because of who I am. It's 99%, like the people I see espousing these sorts of theories, conspiracy theories, which is what they are. You go to their social media and their Twitter, and it looks like, they're still drawing superheroes like out of the 90s, and they've got their own universe, and they are not being rewarded for that output the way it's clearly expected to be. And the answer can't be, this isn't current, this isn't what the market currently wants, this isn't modern, this isn't popular. The fault cannot be with me. The fault must be with the world. The same guy that who every single woman he dates is a crazy bitch. Like, really, all 5 in a row, really? Wow. What are the chances? Wow. That's kind of the same vibe I get. And to be perfectly frank, every once in a blue moon, like maybe every 2 or 3 years, like, I don't have any other way to put this, somebody will just break. And it's because of me. I don't even have to know them. I don't even have to interact with them. And there will be people who send me drunken rants in my email, and I'm like, who are you?
Right.
It's like they have decided, like, there is something, someone sent me screenshots, it was wild. There was like a comics forum on Facebook where people were discussing their favorite publishers, and someone mentioning me just once, like Iron Circus just once, multi-paragraph insane rants from someone who was like, she has an inside, like, everyone, the reason she was at San Diego Comic-Con last year is she was specially invited, and not because she did anything of merit. And it's important to note that, this is a massive conspiracy in comics to pretend Spike is successful. And just, she's an awful person. I hear she's very difficult to work with and very rude. And, just the standard issue Black woman who's this stuff. And it's like watching the entire forum on Facebook just kind of collectively go at this person who was just sort of like in slow motion losing their mind. And eventually someone stepped in and basically said, yeah, I'm going to lock and delete this thread because you're literally embarrassing yourself and you sound kind of unhinged right now. And, yeah. It like someone sent me screenshots like, you would enjoy this. And fortunately, yeah, I do enjoy that kind of thing because I'm extremely spite fueled. And I get 10 emails that are all like, hey there, love what you do, keep it up, woo. And I will like those emails. But if I get an email that's all like, just so you know, I fucking hate you, I'm going to take you down. My actor's like, oh, yeah. You want to do it, fucker? Let's do it, fucker. How about in 10 years we meet up and we compare notes? It's like that.
Let's dance, right?
Exactly.
And you get that.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
For sure. I get multi-paragraph emails where someone is just sort of like clearly talking themselves through like why I get to run this company and they don't. And like some of them are clearly written while inebriated, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's like, wow. I will admit sometimes it's kind of freaky because it's like there are the demographic wherein this reaction happens, and I'm not even pretending it's often, this is like, again, every 2 or 3 years when a person like this pops up. This is also the take the automatic rifle to the school demographic to, exact a revenge that exists only in their mind. And it's one of those things that, yeah, I absolutely do. I do consider that, like when somebody starts taking on a different tone, talking about I'm going to come to the convention and fucking punch you out and stuff like that. It goes from, oh, bring it on, fucker, to, oh, now I've got you. Lifetime ban for you. It's like, because I don't fuck around with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because the sort of level of privilege some people have decided that they are entitled to make them do intensely irrational things. And
well, you know what, Spike, and I want to get to the rest of the questions, but I think this is really interesting, is that there's a huge part of our world that we all live in where people say, and people ask me this once in a while, it's like, well, does race matter in comics?
It does. It absolutely does. Not in the way I think a lot of people think I mean when I say it matters, but I think race matters the same way gender matters, the same way sexuality matters, because people who have different lived experiences see the world through a different lens. And that's kind of how it is. There is no universal experience of Blackness, of womanhood, of heterosexuality, bisexuality, homosexuality, asexuality, pansexuality. There is no universal lived experience. And I like it when someone who has a very different lived experience from me submits a story and it's from this perspective that I could never possibly have first person access to. And authenticity in that sense is really interesting and important to me. And I know some people always only talk about authenticity because they're like, but I want to write a story about a werewolf. And like, there aren't authentic werewolves. It's like, no one's saying there are. But the thing is, the interpretation. A good example now, I'm so glad this show is on. A good example now is Lovecraft Country. Which
I started watching that. That's dope.
Yeah, which is being told through a completely different lens. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's like, no, there's no Cthulhu. No, there's no fishmen coming up from the deep. No one's saying that's real. However, the interpretation of those stories through a totally different lens is what makes it fresh. Yeah. And that is how I think, being a Black person, a Hispanic person, an Indigenous person, a Two-Spirit person, a person with a marginalized sexuality can affect storytelling. And I think we should all be super fucking into that because that's super interesting. Like stuff that you can't experience firsthand, kind of interpreted and pushed out through the lens of, here's my vampire story that's by me, but touches on things that a vampire story you would write would never touch on. Right. And I think it's great.
Cool. All right. I got a couple. I have one that's more creative lending, and then I have two publishing questions about Iron Circus. Our good buddy Angela Sky asks, Spike, what is your most favorite part of your creative process?
Oh, God.
That's refreshing, isn't it?
I have a problem where I will decide, here's a thing, and this thing I'm going to draw, it's going to be exclusively for fun. I refuse to attach a story to it. I refuse to give it a setting. I'm not going to monetize it in any way. I'm just going to sit and draw dumb crap with extremely limited appeal that is just for me. And I try hard to make that happen, but eventually stories get attached. But I think my very favorite thing is just having an hour or two to myself and drawing dumb crap that is there just because it tickles my funny bone specifically. And a perfect example would be, there is this West African mythical creature. I can't call it a cryptid, but it's a mythical supernatural creature called a Boltungan. If you play D&D, maybe it's in one of your monster manuals. And it's essentially a were-hyena person. And they kind of are vampires, are mostly cannibals, and they transform into hyenas, and they like to eat lovers, either their own or clandestinely meeting, under the moon outside the village without their disapproving families seeing. And I really like the concept of Boltungan. So I sit there and I draw what is my interpretation of a Boltungan when I want to unwind. And it's weird and kind of gross. And it has, again, extremely limited appeal, but it's just for me. I like it. So that's when I'm having the most fun, when I'm sitting there just obsessively drawing the same dumb shit over and over and over because it's just for me.
Is that kind of like your warm-up process, or do you have a separate activity?
I have no warm-ups. I just, if I have work to do, I get right to it. I don't do warm-ups. Everything, part of the reason that I have a hard time uploading art regularly is probably because I don't do warm-ups. I sit there and I draw it and I draw it and I draw it. And if it's not working out, I delete the whole thing. Like, there's no 5-minute sketches. There's nothing that disciplined and sensible. I just get going. I dive in and just go for it.
Okay. And also, before I get to some more questions, I remember Spike, you did a lot of things early. This is one of the things I love about you. And I remember you were doing digital work early, right?
Yeah. Like you were just talking about Clip Studio Paint. Oh my God. Like, I was working in Photoshop, and any cartoonist who works in Photoshop can tell you it's not for you. You know, it's not, at least when I was, maybe it's changed in the last 5 years of recent updates. I can't speak to those. I haven't used them. But when I was using Photoshop, it was very clearly not for cartoonists. You had to basically just sort of take a hammer and beat it into shape, into something you could use, and download like all these automated processes that would make flood filling all the colors easier. And just, there was a lot of specialization that needed to go into Photoshop. And I was using a Wacom tablet and doing Temple, Arizona in Photoshop. After a while, it shifted from on paper to fully digital. And then I I bought Clip Studio Paint back before it was called that. When I bought it, it was called Manga Studio.
Manga Studio, yeah.
And it was completely life-changing. It's the first time I used a program that was specifically made for the kind of stuff I was making, and it makes a world of difference. When I draw these days, I basically ink in vectors in Manga Studio, and there's so many like little tiny things that make that so pleasant, like infinitely scaling up and down, big deal. And the fact that there's a community that makes all these brushes for it, and they're like the thing that I love, and everyone's going to call me a cheater. I don't care. The thing that I love is you can take a 3D model in Manga Studio and pull it into the page you're drawing and pose it in case you're like, how do I do this? And then you can just basically draw over it. And what I have is, I do not draw true to life people. I do not draw the sort of heroic Bern Hogarth 8 heads tall people that people are used to seeing. My people are about 5.5 to 6 heads tall, and because I like it. It's my aesthetic preference. And, you know, I have models in Manga Studio that have the proportions of the characters I draw, and it makes everything so much easier. And then it has all like the ways to cheat 3-point perspective, and it has the page setups. It's just, oh my God, it's amazing. It's so much better. And like Photoshop, you know, it was sufficient, but Manga Studio is amazing.
Yeah, people think we're making it up. Like, Clip Studio is where it's at.
It is. Oh my God, you will. It has saved me on every drawing I make. It saves me hours.
That's great. All right. My buddy Tim Fielder jumped in here, and I asked him to break his comments down because he asked 2 questions at the same time. Tim, you're killing me. So I'll just try to get into these. Tim, who's a prolific graphic novelist, says 2 questions, Spike. 1, what do you make of today's media landscape? And two, what's your feeling about navigating the mainstream trade space, or does it matter?
I think the media landscape is incredibly exciting because for the first time in ever, really, a person has the ability to completely self-support outside any corporate structure, outside any editorial interference. And that can be both good and bad. And again, this sort of contradicts what I was saying before about never letting the door shut behind you, never becoming overly reliant on a single platform or single means of income. I think disaster that way lies. And part of the reason I say that is, again, I was part of sort of the early wave of webcomics, and there was a thing that happened to us that was called adpocalypse. And in short, back in the day, banner ads made fucking money, like thousands of dollars a month. You could just subsist off banner ads, and that was temporary. There are people paying mortgages on banner ads, but then what ended up happening is all the people, the ad servers, noticed on webcomic sites that there's not a lot of text, and they need text to spider the site and know what kind of ads to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And they couldn't serve ads on a page that was mostly image. And so they began kicking all the webcomics off their ad networks. And up until then, like, there was a lot of work, like, people loved ad networks because, oh, here's the best paying ad network. It will serve all its ads first. And then when it's out of ads to serve, it'll kick it down to the next ad network, and then kick it down, kick it down, kick it down. There are people on 5 ad networks, and the one at the bottom was Google, because Google would serve anything to anybody. Mm-hmm. So it's like you always had an ad running on your site. And this was referred to as the cascade, because, you know, like going down, down, down. And again, there are people making thousands and thousands of dollars off of their cascades. And that was aspirational for people like me. I only ever made like $300 off mine a month. And those people lost everything. Like the minute their ad networks just kicked them off, they would go from making $4,000 in a month to nothing. Yeah. And that was a big part of defining my fear of becoming over reliant on one thing. But yeah, today's media landscape is incredible. There are so many specialists who would never be supported by mainstream corporations that now are fully supported by their Patreons, fully supported by their Kickstarters. They just do a webcomic. Tracy from Lackadaisy Cats is a perfect example. Sorry, just Lackadaisy, not Lackadaisy Cats. Tracy from Lackadaisy is a perfect example of that, where it's just her and her Patreon, and, you know, she's good, never mind. There are people who run a Kickstarter a year, and that Kickstarter makes 200,000, 300,000. They're good. That's fine. Mm-hmm. And the stuff they make isn't necessarily something that Fox, Disney, Warner Brothers would be particularly interested in. And that's fine. They don't want the interest of those people because they don't need the interest of those people. Mm-hmm. So the media landscape is more fragmented, but I don't see that as a negative. And it's kind of reflected in the book market too. Or again, my distro sits all of us down and sort of explains the nature of the book market to us once a year. And what is happening is the book market is what's considered mature. It's pretty much always the same size with a gentle trend upwards. And it doesn't really change. But what's changed about it is, if you zoom in, a larger proportion of the book market is being taken up by small press publishers and independent creators. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if, you know, Random House, Macmillan, and HarperCollins took up 75% of the market, now they take up 65, and then they take up 60. You know, it's like, so their share is shrinking. The market's staying the same size, but more people are buying from small press creators. And I think that's a great trend. I'm a huge fan of that.
I love it.
And as far as navigating the mainstream trade space, if you do not learn it as a comics publisher, you are going to have a bad time. And it's bizarre to me. There are publishers that are still out there that are sort of resisting the mainstream trade space. And it's like leaving money on the table. It's like, as a publisher, I feel you owe it to the people you work with, the creators that you are working with, to do everything in your power to get their book seen and sold. Mm-hmm. And if you're one of these bizarro ass publishers who are out here like, oh, we don't do ARCs. Oh no, we don't really do ALA. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, really, like, but nobody in comics knows who Kirkus is. Why would we send them a book? It's like, no, you need to get on this fucking train. You owe it to your creator. And I can't even say, it's like, there are going to be books that just don't hit.
Right. But
at the end of the day, I want to be able to look at everyone I work with in the eye and be like, I tried. Mm-hmm. I got you on Idolize. I got you on NetGalley. I sent out long lead and short lead arcs. You were in a galley box. Every journal got a copy of your book. And I had you do a virtual tour of middle schools where you could talk about your book with the kids. I did everything in my power. Your shit just didn't hit. That's just the way it is sometimes. But I can look you in the eye and say I tried. And that's important to me. And I don't understand why it's not important to other publishers.
One thing before we get to the next thing, and how are you feeling? We know we've just been rolling. You good?
No, I love the sound of my own voice. Are you kidding me? Love it.
Is that beyond all this being really illuminating, I think, just your presence on this podcast and talking things from your angle makes me think about the person that gets into comics because they love comics and then finds out later that it's a business.
Yeah.
Right.
There's always going to be that creator, and I love working with these creators. I love working with all creators. There's always going to be that creator that is, I call them the I just want to draw creator, where they want to make their book and hand me the pages, and then 8 months later I'll send them their comp copies, and then every 6 months they get a check from sales. Like that's fine. I work with those people all the time. But if you want to lean in, it's better for you. If you are willing to visit schools, if you are willing to come out to ALA and sign a few things, if you are willing to go to Midwinter and sign a few things, if the Graphics Novel and Comics Roundtable of the American Library Association invites you to be on a panel and you're willing to go, because I'll pay your way. I will pay your way. If you're willing to go, that's going to help. It will absolutely help. I get if you're like, I just want to sit alone in my room, because I work with creators. I think they're fucking brilliant, but they just want to sit alone in their rooms. Okay. But if you lean in, it could be the difference between a book that does okay and a book where we sell 10,000 copies in the first month.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how it is.
Yeah. We talk. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll do my part, but if you're willing to do yours, it helps.
We talk a lot about this on the podcast. It's just about there's different frequencies with all of the creatives that we know or even walk past in the comic book convention, where I think people are now getting used to seeing myself and Mike and Brett on their computer screens every week. And you have an assumption that all comic book people or cartoonists or creatives are comfortable doing this stuff. But like you were just saying, I'm sure you have clients who are just like, no, I can't. No, I don't. I can't.
Let's see if I have a copy of his book here too. Is it here? Oh, here we go. Okay. This is one. If I can get it without. Okay, great. I got it. This is one of my favorite cartoonists I'm working with right now.
Hold on. Let me give you the whole screen. Give me a second.
This is John Allen. He does little cute animals that live in a terrible Rust Belt town. And I'm publishing another book by him called Julian in Purgatory soon. But this is the first book of his I've published, called The Lonesome Era. Cool. It's just these little sweary, awful animals that like beat each other up and get high and vomit on one another. It's great. I love it. But John is non-existent on social media. And I genuinely believe his book would sell way better if he had a Twitter or something. I really do. I love it, and I'm going to back it, and I'm going to stan it, and I'm going to make sure it gets where it needs to go. But I do think he's leaving money on the table by not leaning in more. And as a contrast, Banned Book Club, the book I was discussing, it's by Ryan Estrada and Hyung-Suk Kim. And Ryan Estrada is so extroverted and so like sort of he knows how to work the room is the best way to put it. He made a Banned Book Club dedicated Twitter that retweets nothing but Banned Book Club news. He talks about going to radio station. He goes to radio stations. He goes to children's groups. He goes to libraries. He is always going, hey, just so you know, I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to do that. He got on a plane from Busan, South Korea with Hyung-Suk and flew all the way to Washington, D.C., so he could go to the American Library Association annual and be on a panel and sign 100 copies. He leaned way the fuck in, and it did make a difference. It made a huge difference.
Yeah, and like Mike, we talk about this stuff all the time, and just even the kind of like chasm that's starting to even get bigger between, say, last generation or a couple generations back of cartoonists who were just not willing to make that step to digital. Shit, even us doing this live podcast with our faces is a leap from audio. Yeah.
There are a lot of people out there who are like, oh, I'm a cartoonist. I don't want to be on a podcast. I don't want to do this. I want to just leave me alone. I just want to draw. And yeah, I don't necessarily think that's an age thing, because like I said, John's pretty young and that's kind of how he is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think you are, as a person like working on the internet right now, you are kind of doing yourself a disservice if you're not, putting on the cheerleader skirt and grabbing your pom-poms from time to time and just going, yay me,
Mike, were you going to say something about that leap to the next phase of publicity?
Well, I think that there's always that small percentage of artists who are early adopters. Even if you go back to guys like Kirby, he and Joe Simon invented romance comics.
Yes, he did.
Right,
That's something a lot of people don't know.
So you would never think the guy who created Captain America would draw stuff for girls.
Yeah.
Ew, right? I mean, there always had people like that who were in the forefront of their business-minded part of the business. I think the thing is that our generation, anyone say from 30 to 50, is dealing with the fact that the world is changing in ways that you cannot predict. And you cannot predict 5 years ago, you could not predict webtoons 5 years ago.
Mm-mm.
And you can't predict where we will be 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Because if AT&T and Disney keep gobbling people up, it's going to keep changing the parameters of the game. The direct market, or the floppies, or whatever you want to call it, is probably really on its way out now, because neither one of those companies who have made billions of dollars in the past decade off of Superman or Captain America or whatever, they're not spending one thin dime to advertise print.
Yeah. It's worth noting that, like, okay, the thing that I remember when, like, you know, people kind of still entertained this fantasy that Disney's getting into comics now was a thing I heard. And I'm like, no, Disney is getting into Iron Man now. And there is a difference between Iron Man and comics. Those aren't, you know, the same thing. But a Disney movie starring those characters, because that's what they bought when they bought Marvel. They bought a stable of known properties. That's what they were after. A movie starring those characters makes opening weekend what the entire comics market makes in a year. And Disney is working on a level that is inconceivable to most comics publishers, where they expect to make $1 billion in 3 days, and that will be a sufficient return.
And if you don't, and you only make 900 million, you suck.
Yeah, you fucked up somehow. And it's like when you explain it in those terms, when you just go, why in the world would a multi-nation conglomerate fight tooth and nail for a slice of $1 billion when they can make $1 billion in 3 days doing something else? It's the same. It's like, it's a much more exaggerated and insane version of me going, why would I go to a convention and fight for 3 days to make $200 when, you know, I'm getting checks of $20,000 from the distro. So that's where I'm going to put my energy. And I don't even need to leave my room. You know, like that's what they're doing. That's the thought process. And when they talk about it that way, it's like, oh, it's no wonder that, you know, hilariously, they're licensing Marvel characters to be written and published by other comics companies, which I think is just like the funniest thing on earth. Like, could you demonstrate more completely you don't give a shit? Like, you own a comics publisher, but you license the characters to be published by another comics publisher.
Yeah, it's
like,
wild. Yeah.
But
yeah, and so I think, as I advise the young student now, that you might want to draw Batman or Spider-Man, but that may be your dream, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has a dream. Like, some people
bucket list, yeah.
Right. But you've got to develop your own IP, because
oh my God.
Long term, those companies don't care about you. And you could be the number one guy for 10 years with them. And then they decide, the new guy comes in, the new head president, and kills all the old Lions, Cubs, and you were one of the Cubs that was in there, you're gone. Yeah. And you can't, and like I said, we could not predict. You couldn't predict 20 years ago that Disney would own Marvel and Darth Vader.
Yeah. I mean, that's okay. I don't want to, this sounds very, but like, I'm still kind of like alternative indie kid at heart. And part of me is just kind of horrified with how super comfortable people seem to be with one company making all their entertainment.
Well, because they don't care. They're just consuming.
Yeah.
So if you're a consumer of comics, you just like comics, right? Like the kids in my class, 14, 15, 16 years old, they just like comics. So the way they consume comics, though, is this. They don't care about print, because they're never going to go in a bookstore, right? They might go into their school library, and the savvy librarian goes, I got to have something in here to keep them in the library, right?
A lot of librarians think that.
Because boys don't read.
Yeah.
Girls read, boys don't read,
Mhm.
right? So they're trying to find material for 12-year-old boys to read,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Now that used to be Spider-Man.
Now it's Boku no Hero Academia.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just it's one of those things where it's like I'm not, if you love Star Wars, if you loved Endgame, if you loved all that shit, I am not bagging on your shit. This is not me bagging on your shit, I swear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, you just, what you were saying, Mike, about how you are disposable no matter how hot shit a penciler you are on, you know, book of the month right now. This is going to sound so grim, but when I was in my 20s going to San Diego Comic-Con and in the, you know, the small press section at San Diego Comic-Con, when I would take my break and I'd walk around, there was a section that's now almost completely taken up with like videos and toys, but that used to be sort of the artist's alley. And
Artist Alley is way,
yeah,
it's like a galaxy far, far away.
And it used to be populated with people who were like 60, 70, maybe even older. All I know is they were like very old men. So their hair was like completely white or completely gray and white. So not middle-aged, older than that. And they would be doing sketches of characters they either super popularized or invented. And they would be doing them for like $65 a piece, $75 a piece. Get a sketch from the guy who invented Wolverine or something. And I would be informed they were doing that to pay their nursing home bills. And they were taking their lives in their hands basically by doing that too, because technically they didn't own any of that stuff. They technically weren't allowed to sell these pictures of these characters because those characters were not their intellectual property. And even at like 20, I remember just thinking about that and thinking about, imagine dedicating 40, 50 years of your working life to something you didn't own. And the day you can't do it anymore, you have nothing. And I remember thinking to myself, that's not going to be me. And that's kind of a lot of where Iron Circus is coming from, where, yeah, I'm happy. I love publishing other people. I love putting books in the world. But number one, there are still things that I publish that are by me. And number two, I've always said, even now, Iron Circus has a price. You know, I have a number in my head. And if someone decides they got to have it, you know, if Guillermo del Toro does a tactical roll into my room 10 minutes from now and says, I will give you $15 million for Iron Circus, I'd be like, cool.
Hey, the door just opened.
Yeah. Exactly. You know, that's kind of been the plan. Like, I need something that's mine. I need something that if I get sick of it, I can sell it and walk away, or it will sustain me until they find me slumped over my drawing table like Alex Toth. You know, it's like that's.
But
that's
you
the
know,
plan.
there's different types of artists. There are artists who are happy. They're happiest working for Disney.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're happy to be a cog, even a big cog,
Yeah.
or a middle-sized cog in that, because, you know, if there's 10 artists, one is the one that's going to create something.
Yeah.
The other 10 are going to take something that's created and do something great with it. And that's the thing that it's like based on your personality. So, you know, if you go into Artist Alley and you see a lot of people creating stuff, basically their own version of the main
Spider-Man, Aquaman,
whatever, right? Yeah. Because they would really prefer to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And now I think we're on the cusp of just really seeing a big change in the opportunity for the 20-year-old to do their stuff. If I was 20 now, like when I was 20, there was no internet.
Yeah.
There was no way to communicate. There was no way to self-publish. There was no way to take my drawing and put it on the internet and immediately have everybody in the world go, that sucks. You suck. Right? That is such a game changer alone.
Huge, yeah.
So you don't even have to go through any kind of hurdle. If you've got enough sweat equity, you might be able to come up with 20 or 30 ideas, and it only takes that one.
Yeah.
It takes that one.
Yeah.
So I think it's harder for people who, like me, came up and said, well, my idea of success when I was 15 or 20 or even 40 was Marvel. And then all of a sudden, in a period of a couple years, that all changes.
Just because of the nature of my job, where I get a lot of pitches from folks who are in their 20s. I can't, maybe it's because specifically this person would never come to me, but I can't think of a single person who is all like, my dream is to draw a Marvel book right now. And I think those people are still out there, but I think they are massively outnumbered by, again, the 20-something who is just being spit out of an art school or high school. And it's just going, I really, really want to do gay witches. You know, I've got to do something about a monster truck, but it's on another planet and it's being driven by kittens. You know, I need to do something where it's about horse racing, but instead of horses, they're riding giant dogs and the giant dogs can talk. You know, like people have their own ideas now at a much higher frequency, in my opinion, than it used to be. It used to be people would go to San Diego Comic-Con and they were there for a portfolio review because they were determined to ink I don't know, goddamn, X-Men. Let's go with the obvious one. And I don't know the person who is foaming at the mouth to ink X-Men anymore. I don't even know of them third hand. And I think that when we talk about how like periodicals and comic shops are kind of not in a great place, and it doesn't thrill me to say that because I'm friends with comic shop owners and their comic shops I really enjoy going to, but again, it's kind of indisputable where you look at where the growth is in graphic novels, and there isn't any growth really in periodicals, and a lot of comic shops still very much rely on being that space that's dedicated primarily to periodicals. The smart ones are diversifying, but as we all know, not everybody's smart. So,
well, you know, I have an idea for you, and maybe you'd be up for it. I have a comic I'd like to do about a gay witch, a school of gay witches that drive monster trucks.
I'd probably publish that. That would be amazing.
my little monster truck academia.
Yeah, my little monster truck. Honestly, the thing is that would probably kind of sell to the right crowd.
Yeah, there's totally a market for that.
It's like I'm just like so into like the weird off the wall shit people come up with, like when they put it in my inbox. And you know, I think that someone just ages ago mentioned Frederick Wordham, and Frederick Wordham did a whole shitload of damage to comics in the United States. But I think we're kind of on the cusp of correcting that in a lot of ways, because like now there's this diversity in subject matter out there that we haven't seen in a long time. And yeah, Webtoons has a lot of romance and a lot of sort of manga and anime inspired stuff, but the alternative comic scene is just so out there, and pretty much whatever you're into, you're going to be able to find something. And
all orbits are there now. You can do Batman, you can do manga, you can do French, Japanese, hybrid. You can do everything. I think the difference, as I have observed from teaching young people, is that there will be some things that are very big. It's rare that you will have things that will last. There will be like a Harry Potter, because everybody's looking for a Harry Potter, right?
Oh my
Everybody
God!
wants to find a thing. Everybody wants to find the next Harry Potter or Star Wars. The problem is this makes everything cheap, and so they like to consume it, but they like to consume it just like they like to watch TikTok videos.
Yeah.
Right, and because there's no backing board, there's nothing precious about this.
Yeah,
that's the thing that works against you at the same time. It's great for you because you can reach a lot of people, you can put a lot of stuff out there. People can just do this all day. So I see something cool, but now I see something else cool. That's
why I think it's so important that you also sort of, and forgive me for this language, but build your brand. And like it's important to have people who don't just see you as sort of a cool ephemeral thing they'll look at for 2 minutes and then move on, but like get into who you are as a creator as well. And I think that some of the most successful cartoonists that are kind of working right now are cartoonists who have a brand, have an image, have sort of a persona on the internet. And that's an important part of not necessarily their output, but like how they interact with fans. Like there's a certain level of expected accessibility these days that wasn't necessarily part of the package, 10 years ago.
Actually, there was I would say in the mainstream that I came from, there was always sort of that like you want the fans, but like, whoa, back up.
Keep your distance, right? Yeah.
Where I think now there's a familiarity because of technology.
Oh yeah. Just people asking you casual questions on Twitter and they expect an answer.
The same question, but
yeah,
over and over.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing some guys who were big X-Men guys in the mid 80s when I started, early 80s when I was going to conventions, and they were not always so nice to the fans because a fan is going to ask you a fan question.
Mm-hmm.
If you find that the fan asking you the fan question annoys you, don't go to the convention.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Don't disrespect, unless people really go above or overboard. You should try to respect the people that put you on the other side of the table, or screen.
Screen, yeah.
Right, but and I do think that the nature of this will also change because probably webtoons will get played out in a year or two, and then everybody will jump to whatever the new thing is. You know what I mean? Because that's part of the thing. There's so many, like my girlfriend Mimi just did a webtoon, and she put it up, and there were so many thousands of kids entering that webtoon contest compared to the last webtoon contest, right? That like you couldn't even get people to see your stuff because there was so much just like being blasted at that.
And I think it's important to note too, I've seen, I should say, conversations on Twitter where someone is like air quotes big on webtoons, where someone has a comic that's publishing on webtoons, and they're all like, "Oh my God, I'm getting this many hundreds of thousands of views on my comic. I can't believe it. This is huge. This is amazing." But who your audience is matters as much as raw numbers, and the whole who your audience is coming into play when, let's say, you decide, oh my God, hundreds of thousands of views every time I update. That means it's Kickstarter time. Like, okay, I'm not saying your Kickstarter won't fund, but at the same time, the webtoons audience might not even be old enough to have a credit card.
They don't have money.
And maybe that's why they're reading webtoons. Maybe you need to figure out a different way to monetize your popularity there, because if they can't back your Kickstarter, those hundreds of thousands of page views aren't going to be reflected in your take. And that's something that I think is worth keeping on top of, the demographics of the fan base you choose to cultivate.
Right,
oh, and I saw there's a question here about Spike. Would you do movies? I've already sold my first option, so it's like that's not
even if you don't make it, just keep reselling the option.
Yeah, I have no interest in making a movie myself, like sitting down and having the camera and making the movie. But if people approach me and they're all like, "Oh my God, I really like this thing you did. Can I buy an option?" It's like, yes. I would never discourage a creator that I work with either from taking a good deal. I will discourage the fuck out of a bad deal. Yeah. But if, again, Guillermo del Toro and his tactical rolls into my room screaming that he absolutely needs a comic, if the deal he presents is fair and good, I'm going to be like, fucking go for it, grab it. Because again, we're all independent. I work with creator-owned stuff. So we're all independent creators. None of us has a 401k. We need to make hay while the sun is shining. And if that entails selling an option for a movie that may or may not happen, but in the immediacy of the moment, getting enough for a down payment on a small house in the country, fucking go for it. I mean, I'm from that generation, and maybe you two can sort of understand this, where selling out was a thing. It was a thing that was considered deplorable and undignified. Oh, you fucking sell out, you sold out. No, that's you basically being rewarded for your own intellectual property. And people these days who sell out, who
That's
complain about,
what all
yeah.
sellouts say.
Yeah. People these days who complain about sellouts, it's like, you just wish someone was buying, dude. You know, it's like no one's buying anything that you have. That's why you're upset about other people selling out.
Spike, I want to do these last questions so you can go pee. All right, so these are Iron Circus business questions.
Cool.
Jose, thanks for joining us. Says, Spike, did you see artists at Angoulême that if you could, you'd bring to Iron Circus? Heard the podcast about your trip. Sounds awesome.
It isn't. What's up? It is an amazing trip. I would love to go back. I am actually still, everything has slowed to a snail's crawl due to the pandemic, but I'm in negotiation to get one book, and I am in negotiation to sell at least 2 or 3 other books. Banned Book Club, just because of the kind of numbers it's doing, it's gotten interest from French, Spanish, and German publishers, so we're kind of mid-negotiation there. But a lot of licensing for foreign languages is a very sort of face-to-face handshake kind of thing, apparently. And because people can't really meet or go to all the book fairs like they normally would, things have really slowed down. But yeah, I have submitted I wanted to buy 2 books. I was super outbid on one. But the other one is a possibility, and I've submitted a bid for it. And, you know, Banned Book Club is making the rounds at the debutante ball, seeing who will dance with it. So I think it's amazing. I think it's super interesting and super fun. I was scared my first trip because, you know, it wasn't just my first time to a book fair. It was the first time to France. And it was the first time to a country where I didn't speak any of the language. And it wasn't really a problem. Yeah. So if any of you out there are, you know, you're a publisher or whatever, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can go to Angoulême, that's in France, and I don't speak French, it's fine. Yeah. Everyone will speak English. It's fine.
Most people, it seems, over there speak English. So
yeah, and I was always afraid because, you know, as an American, you hear these stories about, oh, they're going to be super mean to you when they find out you don't speak French and they're in your country. No one cared. Like, there are people from China, there are people from Belgium. It's an international festival, and it's weird and like, this is Angoulême's whole thing. Right. The whole town is dedicated to comics. They're not going to be shitty to people from other countries who are here for comics.
Right, unless you're a loud American wearing white shoes.
Yeah, honestly, I'm pretty loud American. They didn't give me a hard time at all. The biggest problem I had in Angoulême is there was a major language barrier with me and one of the security guys, because I was asking for directions, and I had to pull out my phone and have the phone translate something. And then he was like, oh, oui, yeah, like over there and pointing. And I also, it was fun. I got to explain the TV show My 600-Pound Life to a non-American. And they couldn't, like, they were like, so there are enough 600-pound people in America to not just make one episode, but like seasons and seasons. I was like,
Spike, I feel like you kind of we'll move on. We kind of just answered this, but I'm going to throw it up anyway. Juan said, Spike, what's your current sitch publishing in foreign language markets? I think you need
It's one of those things where there is absolutely a monetary barrier to getting that ball rolling. But once you enter those spaces, it picks up momentum on its own, because by the time you are seriously pursuing selling translation rights for books, you probably have a pretty significant back catalog. You've met a bunch of people face to face. You are you are like the debutante at the ball, where they're like, oh, this publisher is now ready to enter this space and do this thing. Right now, I have representation from an agency called the Laura Fountain Agency. She does a lot of comics representation. She's shopping Banned Book Club to a lot of people. She has a lot of contacts. And I am also using her and a couple other people I met at Angoulême to pursue the rights to other books. When you show up at these shows, everybody's got a catalog, and the catalog is full of available titles and what licensing is available. And very few people expect you to make decisions right then and there at the show. You take the catalog home, you read through it, and then you write and you ask, hey, can I see a sample of this? And they send you a sample, and you either like it or you don't. And as far as Banned Book Club went, that's kind of what I did. I just gave everyone sample copies, and It's best to give them a URL to. We had a secret directory full of PDFs for them to read because you can't take sample books from everyone. Not at Angoulême. You'd have to bring a whole new suitcase. So PDFs are big. And I've gotten interest in things. The ball, again, is not moving nearly as quickly as I'd like because of the pandemic. But I have kind of been through the hazing of doing that for the very first time. And I'd love to do it again.
Cool.
We've sold foreign rights for a couple of books already. Blue Delaquante's Meal is published in Spanish in Spain, and Banned Book Club is published in Korean in South Korea, where it, at least at one point, was outselling One Punch Man, which was yeah.
Right. I'm gonna give you snaps for that.
Yeah, outselling One Punch Man in any capacity was not a thing I was prepared to have happen to me this year, but it did.
That's right. All right, Spike. Last question of the night, and then we're gonna cut bait. Friend of the show, Britt. Hey, Britt. Britt asks, Spike, you've been giving great advice for young folks in the audience tonight. When it comes to going international, is there any marketing / copyright stuff to look out for?
That's going to be on a real individual basis. All the publishers that you're going to meet are going to be completely different publishers in completely different senses. There's going to be like the big dogs of each country, and it's worth kind of researching anyone you work with. Get a phone plan so you can Wikipedia people who approach you or who you're looking to approach before the show even starts. Like, just the way, I don't know if any other show does it this way, but the way Angoulême does it is in the months leading up to the show, you get access to a secret website that only attendees can see. And basically that is where you organize meetings, and you can request meetings with other publishers, or other publishers will request meetings with you. And their names are right there. And if you go and look up the publishers, you might be able to draw a pretty good bead on what they want. And most of the people, not all, but most of the people who are going to request meetings with you are people who are going to want to try and sell you something. And that's kind of the same reason you're requesting meetings with other publishers. Like, it's better if it's got a sort of more reciprocal feel where you're both willing to look at one another's catalogs. And just like a job interview, it's nice if you go in and go, oh yeah, hi ABC Publishing, I'm really happy that you accepted my meeting because I'm super interested in your book, Funny Kittens Go to the Moon. I really think it would move in the youth market in the United States. But hey, yeah, I've also got this. You want to maybe, you little from you, little from me, what's up? Like, just knowing who they are, because a lot of publishers, myself included, Iron Circus included, they have very strong senses of self and what they stand for and what their philosophy is. And so, like, you don't want to bring Dylan Dog to Iron Circus. Iron Circus is going to be like that, and we're not the right people for Dylan Dog. Anyone out there who likes Dylan Dog, good for you, but it's not something I personally want to publish. And you want to make sure the people you approach will do justice to Dylan Dog. Whereas the people I would approach with Iron Circus's output, I want to make sure they would do justice to Iron Circus. And, our publishing philosophy is pretty straightforward. It's strange and amazing, like on, Sideshow Circus banners. Just like the weird and unusual stuff is what Iron Circus has developed a reputation for. And I'm pretty pleased to see a lot of the things that are brought to me. People are like, this seems like your vibe. And I'm like, thank you so much for giving a shit. Thank you so much for being aware of who I am and not just bringing me whatever. And honestly, at this point, it helps to get an agency. Agencies will help you through a lot of things. There's a lot of super annoying tax stuff to deal with when you're working with publishers in other countries, and they'll know what to do. So they'll handle that. Going it alone, you can be a journeyman level in a lot of things, but there are things where it just pays to get a specialist. And I'm kind of at that level where I need specialists. I need literary agencies, and I need someone to do my taxes. I need someone to do pre-press. I need someone to do publicity. And everyone I've hired is now a specialist, where no one, it's like I kind of had this conversation with myself where it's like, no one is saying you couldn't do this if you needed to, but why not hire someone who this is their whole life and they know how to do it perfectly and get and maximize return on their investment of time and competency. It's like, you could do it okay, but this person over here, like, this is all they do.
But Spike, that costs money.
It does. And if you hire the right person, it's worth it. Yeah.
Oh, great. Thanks, Britt. All right. You know what? I think we had, I think that's kind of it. There's, you know what?
One more question from Kino.
Yeah, I'm going to throw this in here, and we kind of
Yes.
touched on it, and I don't want anybody to go home sad. So let's throw this in here. So Kino asks, would like to know how Mice or Cake compares to Wizard World. That was from the beginning.
Oh God, yeah. Okay, Wizard World is trash. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Wizard World is terrible. It's unthinkable. It's garbage. I've only been to the Chicago Wizard World. It's worse than a waste of time. It is the only show in the 2 decades I have done comic conventions. It is the only show I bugged out on where I just didn't come back Sunday. That's how.
I was to ask, have you ever just pulled up camp from a show?
I have. And Wizard World Chicago was the only show where at the end of Saturday, it's just like, I'm just not fucking coming back. This is garbage. This is just a waste of my time. And it is also the only show where I swear this happened, and I'll never get over this for the rest of my life, because I think it sums up the Wizard World experience beautifully if you are an independent creator, where I had all my comics on the table and some dude walked by and he looked at my stuff on my table, looked at me, literally went, and just kept going. Like, how dare I have the audacity to be at Wizard World with original stuff as opposed to, a bunch of Supermen that I'm here to sign for you. It's like, it was so condescending and shitty. And I was just like, what the fuck merited that? It's like, how did I fucking deserve that? You literally rolled your eyes when you saw what was on the table. It was just comics, bro. It wasn't like anything that was completely off the wall I wasn't over here selling flower crowns. They were comics. They make sense to be at Wizard World. But yeah, it's like, and if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the person who ran Wizard World, as a overarching series of cons, weren't they busted for doing signature scalping? The whole deal is I
think one of the
one of them.
And not the original guy, but I think one of the managers or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like
scalping signatures or something.
Yeah, what they would do is they were focusing the con more and more on signature collecting, and people were all like, that's weird. And it turns out part of the reason was they were getting the company to comp these folks who did signings at shows to come in, and then when they would show up to do, to go to their booths and do whatever, do their signings, before they'd go, they'd be brought up to the guest suite. And while they're in the guest suite, this guy was showing up with oh, while you're here, I've got 100 headshots for you to sign. And, they just do it. And this person was just turning around and taking them to eBay or whatever, or collectible people, and just making thousands of dollars on the side selling these signatures. And that's why he was focusing so much on getting these signature alleys. And I was all like, I mean, it's a pretty good racket if you don't get caught, but you got caught. So
I have some books we'd like you to sign before you leave.
Exactly. And that's why he was doing that. And but Wizard World, I cannot speak to any other Wizard World, but Wizard World Chicago, colossal insulting waste of time.
I think the general rule should be, if you're a young artist and you're going to a show and you got to pay $300 for your table, and you got to share a hotel room with 75 people, and you got to eat, mall food or whatever, you should really investigate whether that's the proper audience for you, because you may find that spending that time, that much money online, and doing some tracking with Instagram to discover who's buying your books, what your reach is, would actually go further than standing in Hall H all weekend.
Yeah.
But again, I think that you've gained your business experience over time.
Yeah.
And now time moves faster because of all the things we talked about tonight, right? So you're a young creator already. You can reach people that you couldn't even have dreamed about reaching from the start. So you have to put your business hat on.
And for what it's worth, Cake, if you're a local, fantastic show, 100% worth doing if you are in the small press or alternative scene. if we're talking net as opposed to gross, I make more at Cake than I do at C2E2. I make more at Cake than I do at ECCC because the travel is nothing. It's an Uber. You know, that's what my expense for Cake is. Fantastic show if you're small press or alternative. If you're small press or alternative, like the good shows to me are ECCC, Cake. SPX is kind of like the granddaddy. I always make serious bank at SPX. It's really great. The rest are kind of like take or leave shows. Quite frankly, Mocha, not a great show. I'm probably never going to do Mocha again unless invited.
Too many tire kickers?
Honestly, a lot of the people that, okay, this is going to sound terrible, but whenever I do a New York show, I'm always under the impression I'm going to do well there because it's New York. And it's like, well, people here make big salaries, so they won't mind spending $15 on a comic book. No, people in New York don't want to buy nothing. They want everything for free, pretty much. It's the only New York shows are the only shows I've done where someone will take like a full-size graphic novel off the table and be all like, "Is this free?" And I'm like, what in the world would make you think that's free? It's like it has a price tag literally on it. But I know friends who do New York Comic Con, but like I have been told unless you have a couch to crash on and you can bust down, it's literally not worth it. So, but
yeah, I totally agree with you on different regions or areas or shows specifically are going to get more mileage depending on what you're selling and what your whole plan of attack is.
Yeah.
And I hope that you have one before you start booking yourself at shows.
Yeah. Know which cons are for you. There are cons I've stopped doing because they have changed over time. The perfect example of this is Phoenix Comic-Con. I would do Phoenix Comic-Con with friends for years on end. And then the last year we did it, we noticed there was a significant change in the mood of the show where it shifted focus to the guy who was in Star Trek, the guy who was Chewbacca. Come pay $50 to get a photograph with this dude who was in, what's that movie? Shit. I don't know. This dude who was in Sci-Fi Movie, come pay $50 to get a photo with him. Right. And as the focus began to shift, the audience shifts because it's not like there's no crossover, but a person who is going to be all like, I am here so I can get a photograph with Guy in Star Trek and then maybe buy a couple posters he signed. That's not necessarily going to be the person who's going to then wander on over to the alternative comics table and see what I've got going on. And I wrote on Twitter, like the year it was like that Saturday in the hotel room, me and my friends are just like, this is our last year. And like nobody disagreed. We all felt it on the wind and we all tweeted, y'all want a book from us, come get it Sunday because we're not coming back to Phoenix. and there was a lot of, what? Why? And we're all like,
spot. I love it. Yeah.
The show is clearly not for us anymore. That's why.
I love it. And also
interesting to see what happens after the pandemic, how the stuff continues to shift, because I don't think there's going to be any shows next year. I think next year we're still not going to have the vaccine. And I think even if they get partial vaccine, I think there's a lot of people I know personally who will not feel comfortable traveling. I don't know. You might show up and like everybody decided that weekend.
I mean, people go to conventions and they come back diseased on the best day. Well, like there's a term for it. We all get con crud. It's not
con rot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we're used to going to shows and coming back, and then you're getting off the plane on the way home, and you just feel that tickle in your throat, and you're just like, fuck. But like people, I love going to cons. I love people. You're all disgusting. None of you wash your hands, and you're just gross, and you're coughing and sneezing and just nasty. And that's just a hotbed of disease. And just imagine coronavirus at San Diego. Like, could you even conceive of that disaster?
No, that's like ground zero.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a cartoonist. My job is to imagine horrible things. I can clearly imagine exactly that scenario.
Because anybody here, just like if you've never been, just look up photos of what the hall floor looks like in San Diego. It's like cattle, like just cheek to jowl, people just slowly shuffling their way down the hall, and it's like you are shoulder to shoulder, you are in people's business, and just, oh my god, you could just picture coronavirus, like, it's just like it's it's a perfect setting. It's disgusting.
I love it. Well, on that note, Spike.
Disgusting note.
Yeah.
Spike, how can people find your wares and your company on
Yes.
socials?
Hello, everyone. Please support Iron Circus Comics. It is Black owned, woman owned, and creator first. We specialize in the strange and amazing, unusual comics for unusual readers. All of our stuff is on Amazon and bookshop.org. You can also buy it on ironcircus.com, our store. We're also available on Comixology. If you want to listen to me talk about politics, pornography, murderers, or anything else, fine art. I also talk about fine art a lot. You can follow me on Twitter at iron_spike. Also, there's an Iron Circus Comics official Twitter. If you're just here to see me talk about comics or other people, a lot of people have access to that Twitter. It's at Iron Circus Comics. IRONCOMIX, because spelling comics appropriately or correctly would not fit. We're also at ironcircuscomics.tumblr.com for some reason. There's an Iron Circus Comics page on Facebook. And if you have an Instagram, we're at Iron Circus there. The Facebook page and the Instagram are all updated daily. The Twitter is updated usually multiple times daily, except for the weekend. I also have a podcast. The podcast is called Dirty Old Ladies. And if you want to see that, you can go to Twitter and at Dirty Old Ladies. That's us. It's a podcast with my friends, Amanda Lafreniere and Kel McDonald. We're all comics professionals. And we talk about comic stuff. We talk about business stuff. We talk about creative stuff. One of my favorite ones we've done recently is about fan service, wherein I had an on-air epiphany where I talked about how I now believe in my heart of hearts Tetsuo and Kaneda were totally fucking, and nobody will ever convince me they weren't. This is important to me, and, and that's just what I believe. There's nothing you can do about it. But yeah, if you want to listen to that podcast, Dirty Old Ladies, you can find it on Libsyn, find it on iTunes, you can find it wherever you find podcasts. Oh gosh. I'm also on Kickstarter. If you want to be the first to know when a Kickstarter launches, Iron Spike, all one word. And you can follow me on there and get an email and be the first to back. And I think that's about it.
I love it. Spike, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy studio schedule to hang out with us and bless us with some straight talk. That's straight Jake we got tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated catching up with you, Jamar. It's been a long time, and thanks for talking to Mike.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
And hopefully we can have you back on.
Yeah, sure. I have a lot of exciting things brewing. So if I get back here in like a year or something.
Tell Tracy we'd love to have her on too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Spike. You have a great night.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's see.
Yeah. Bye, Spike. Great. I'm just running through the things real quick. That was really amazing. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and for any new people that are new to our podcast who came on the strength of Spike being a guest. Thanks so much. I hope you hang around to see what else we have in store for you. Like we said, Pencil to Pencil runs every Wednesday and Saturday night live at 8 p.m. And you can always catch our archives on our Facebook channel, on our YouTube. And as soon as I get my druthers together, or audio broadcasts also. Mike, I'd like to talk about our next thing on Saturday. I believe, if I'm correct, we're going back to boot camp.
Boot camp.
Yeah, so this Saturday, and we're going to do another boot camp episode, and we had a lot of really great response from our last boot camp episode. I hope that you guys that tuned in for that will tell your friends and be back again on Saturday. Mike, you have any parting words for us?
Boot camp. I haven't decided what to do yet. I'm still. You guys can always leave us a message and let me know. Let us know what you'd like to see. But we'll do another free art lesson.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, we had a great time, and things change as we go along in the live feed. So just a question in the room could change the whole complexion. And JRD wants to know the fate of Man Bun. Is Man Bun going to make it? Maybe we'll find out.
I don't. No man with buns makes it in this world. Tough.
All right, you guys. So again, thanks so much for Spike hanging out with us tonight, and any of the Spike fans or fans of Iron Circus. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Like again, I hope you guys hang out for more content. We love bringing it to you. This has been. Got to get my stuff together. Oh, Mike, people love the Kirby hand sign off. We're going to have to do that tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't wash your Kirby hands.
That's right.
Just crackle.
You got to wash that crackle off. I love it. All right, so we're going to get out of here. So for Pencil to Pencil, joined as always by my best bud Mike Manley, I'm Jamar Nicholas. Until Saturday, wash your hands and put your, I don't know, I got to get a good hand there. And Kirby crackle. All right, have a good night, guys.